Recording in progress.
First up, we have.
All right, thank you, Council Vice President. Good evening, councilors. Happy last day of summer. So hopefully you're getting a chance to enjoy some of this awesome weather we're experiencing. So just a couple brief slides. Short report tonight. And we'll get right to the first slide. All right, as many of you know, and this has been a focus of mine, and I generated a letter and got it out to the some of the region September 9th. The goal of having as many people sign as possible. We had quite a few sign on to the letter. That was following up on some work and the partnership with Kitsap Transit and some, just some working together to make sure that they could actually increase their operations if we found funding. So that was, we have a successful partnership there. So as you can see, this is off and running. It's in the governor's office. State legislatures, representatives followed up with their own letter Monday morning. The Greater Kitsap Chamber of Commerce and the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance both have indicated support as organizations and also reaching out to their individual members to sign on in support and to email the governor's office and their state reps. So that's just a little bit of the effort going on. More to come on that one. We'll keep pushing. We'll keep pushing, and yeah, looking good so far. So next slide, please. Now, this is something code. This is part of an effort. We're going to be increasing these efforts in just kind of it's education, it's awareness. It's kind of giving people a little bit of just some inside information on what might happen if they discharge fats, oils, and grease into our sewer system. So as you know, we had a blockage in this summer, and that blockage was caused by grease deposits. So this was created by Brandon. Let's see, I've got his name here. I want him to have full credit for this work. Brandon Hurst, he's code compliance specialist for Public Works, and he created this information flyer, which will go out to city residents. And so you'll see more of this happening, and yeah, it's just a little bit of do's and don'ts on what you should do with fats, oils, and grease. Next slide, please. And just a quick update on Kitsap Lake. Everybody knows we had an algae bloom recently, and this was this one here is just a result of natural patterns, weather patterns, and the changing seasons. And when that happens, wind air temperature changes can cause algae blooms. And there's a lot more detail. We'll go to the next slide. And this kind of gives you, how a lake water turnover occurs, what happens when trapped phosphorus in the bottom of the lake mixes with the water and above. So the trapped phosphorus is one thing, but then you have a whole water body where it mixes in there. And of course, when that happens, you're starting to promote algae bloom. And so, one of the goals with this entire project is to take something that used to be very and extremely frequent and reduce it to a rare occurrence. And so there's a lot more. I've got a fact sheet in front of me that if you're interested, I'll share with you. And if you have more questions, of course, follow up with Chance, and he can explain it in greater detail. So it's just something, it's not surprising. It'll be, we'll keep monitoring it until the lake is clean again. We'll notify everybody, and then we'll get back to enjoying this beautiful city lake. So that's it tonight, Council. And again, I just want to thank our regional partners, all of them, all the way from Bainbridge Island, every commissioner, Bainbridge to Port Orchard to Paulsville mayors, to every commissioner that represents every part of our county from Hansville to Manchester. for signing on in support of Bremerton specific issue. And it's not, and this issue, when it affects Bremerton, please realize that we are all connected. And when somebody has an option to, in Silverdale, to take a ferry, and we've essentially the Bremerton options all but been eliminated, they're heading north, and that creates all kinds of capacity problems. So while we have it the worst, there are also folks who aren't getting on the ferries on Bainbridge because of the capacity problems. They're ending up waiting in line. It creates all kinds of infrastructure and traffic clogging problems. Again, it doesn't compare to our issues, but this is a regional problem here. And so that's why that's part of the reason everybody's signing on in support of this letter to assist Bremerton with backfilling runs. So, and again, and part of it's just good partnerships where, and I would do the same because we're really only as strong as we are collectively as a whole as we are together. And we don't get things done unless we're working together. So that concludes my report tonight, Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, we have the consent agenda.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice President Chamberlain. For approval on the consent agenda are the following items. A, claims and check register. 1, check numbers 399743 through 399926. Let's check for 35912 and
Ms. Hoover, we are having trouble now hearing you. I'm so sorry.
Internet isn't working. Lori Smith, will you be able to take over consent agenda?
Yes, can everyone hear me? Okay, so let me pull this up. Should I start over with the following checks are approved for payment?
I think so, yeah.
Check numbers
Yes.
399743 through 399926 and EFT numbers V35912 through V36005 and the grand total amount of is that $3,353,916.86 and regular payroll. I apologize, I don't have the amount for regular payroll. Is that included, Angela? Can she hear me?
I think she's a little frozen and she's gone. So.
All right. Okay, I'll skip that part. I got the check register. Item 3B are the minutes for September 7th of 2022. Item 3C are the minutes of the study session for September 14th, 2022. Item 3D is ordinance number 5454, adding section 9A.24.230 to the Bremerton Municipal Code entitled Open Carry of Weapons Prohibited in Municipal Buildings. Item 3E, ordinance number 5455, amending sections 9A.32.070 and 9A.32.080 of the Bremerton Municipal Code entitled Domestic Violence, State Statutes Adopted by Reference, and Order for Protection and Restraining Order, State Statutes Adopted by Reference, respectively. Item 3F, ordinance number 5456, adding sections 9A.44.130 and 9A.44.140 to the Bremerton Municipal Code entitled Interference with a Healthcare Facility and Penalty, respectively. Item 3G, a contract modification agreement number 3 with Rice Fergus Miller Incorporated for the Squincy Square project. Item 3H, contract modification number 4 with Parametrics Incorporated for the Kitsap Lake Park renovation project and related budget adjustment. Item 3I, interagency agreement with Washington State Department of Enterprise Services for energy savings performance contracting program. Item 3J, agreement with Washington State Department of Enterprise Services for investment grade audit of the East Side Treatment Plant. Item 3K, Public Works agreement with Air Management Solutions LLC for installation of upgraded HVAC systems at the wastewater treatment plant administration building. And item 3L, ordinance number 5457, amending chapter 2.50 of the Bremerton Municipal Code relating to the management and professional staff compensation program.
Thank you, Lori. And for public record 3A, part of the summary, regular payroll for pay period ending August 31st to 2022, 2022 for payroll for payouts in the amount of $418.02, and regular payroll for pay period ending in September 15th, 2022 in the amount of $1,014,014.08. Just adding that for public record. Does any member of the public wish to comment on any one of these specific items on our consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will go to council for a motion.
So moved.
Councilor Dennehy,
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
and was there a second? Councilmember Montclair.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I call for the question.
Councilmember Fry,
Yes.
Councilmember Coughlin,
Yes.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Yes.
Let's see, 4, 5. Councilmember Mockler,
Yes.
Councilmember Younger.
Yes.
I have no list in front of me. Council President, Vice President Chamberlain.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Next up is public recognition. As noted on the agenda, public recognition provides an opportunity for attendees to address the council on any city-related item that is not already listed on tonight's agenda. Please raise your hand to be recognized. We ask that you state your name for use in the public record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. And we have a timer system that we'll be using, so everyone is treated equally and fairly. With that, I open up for public recognition. And first up, we have Mary Lou Long.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm Mary Lou Long, as you well know. I had to sign up for this, so you got my name and email. I was going to suggest that we reflect for a moment before I say the Pledge of Allegiance. Have you ever thought how you got to be here and now? You sit in a respected office, in the elected office, in an elected office, elected by the people. How could this have happened? Our forefathers established the most wonderful republic with a plan for self-government. When I say self-government, I mean, or I refer to the fact that people choose their government and their leaders, rather than dictators taking charge. Other men and women fought and died to preserve this form of government. If they had not sacrificed so much and won for our country, we might be under the control of a monarch or a tyrant or Stalin or Adolf Hitler. And if one of those had become the winner of World War II, we might be speaking German. And you might not be in those positions because tyrants and dictators select their friends to put into powerful positions, and there would be no elections. You would not be able to run for office in this great country. You would have to be selected by the Fuhrer. We all should show our respect to the flag of our great country. And with that, since I honor my flag and my country and the men that fought and died for me and you, I now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. You can join me if you like. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I hope someday that we can all stand together in our Norm Dix Building Council chambers and stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance together as a sign of unity and respect for where we came from. Thank you and good evening.
Next up, we have Jane Robolowski.
Hello, Council. I'm not even going to comment on the previous comments, but I would like to comment on the reasons I've been given via email from the Council's legislative aid, saying that you're not having public meetings in person because the Kitsap Public Health has advised you not to. Well, I called Kitsap Public Health and talked to the board administrator, and after he was done laughing, he said that absolutely not do they do that. In fact, they required Kitsap Public Health staff to start meeting with the public in September. And as you can see, these virtual meetings are not working when even the city clerk can't stay signed on. A lot of the conversations are limited and broken up, and we need to get back to at least a hybrid type meeting and have more staff available in regular office hours when the public needs to go in and get permits and other things. It's not, even the president said the pandemic is over. For God's sakes, let's get back to regular in-person meetings. If somebody has a health issue, then of course they can chime in via Zoom or whichever way that other places have already figured out. It shouldn't be that difficult for Bremerton. That's issue number one. Number two, over a year ago, me and some of my friends in the community came up with some very low-cost solutions for some public restrooms to be used primarily by unhoused neighbors. And you guys just keep kicking the can down the road, coming up with different excuses. Oh, we're going to give this to another private nonprofit to solve. Meanwhile, we still don't have public restrooms. So I urge you, just look into your humanity and get some public toilets out there and public garbage cans that people can use on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robolowski. And we don't normally, this is normally like a Q&A, but I did want to reply. I know we have a lot of folks who have been asking us when we're going to go back to in-person meetings. And our aide is working on a plan with members of administration to develop plans so we can return shortly in the month of October, hopefully, as we've stated, to in-person meetings. Thank you. Next up is Kaya Long.
I would like to ask that in the future, maybe the funding for Kitsap Transit can make it for a longer bus schedule past 8 p.m. I found it that some of the transit services, like the 307 in Kingston, is no longer available from Kingston to Bremerton. And yes, I commend some of the past speakers like Jane Leba. I don't want to butcher her name, but Jane, for speaking up about some of the things she spoke of. And I'd like to thank Councilwoman Anna Montclair, who represents Kitsap Transit. Thank you for what you do, and the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Next up is Kathy T. Bradley.
Hello. I just wanted to first thank you all for like hosting these meetings. I very much appreciated like the brief summary at the beginning. I personally didn't know that oils and fats were a bad thing to do. So I definitely appreciate that information, and I look forward to getting that flyer in the mail. And during this session, or during this public recognition part, one thing I just wanted to bring up, like that's important to me as a resident of Bremerton, that has honestly been on my mind like everywhere that I have lived, is public transit, and just the ability to be mobile in my city without the need for a car, or without the need for car dependency. I would love to see, like the previous speaker mentioned, buses that run late. I would love to see buses that run on a regular schedule. I would personally love to be able to go downtown Bremerton and shop and just like hang out in the parks and go to the farmers market without feeling like I need a car to do that on a regular basis. And I also have like family in Poulsbo that I would love to be able to visit without needing a car to drive, only a 30-minute drive. And yeah, so that's really just all I wanted to say, is that like me as a citizen of Bremerton, like public transportation and less car centric infrastructure and more bike safety is really something that's on my mind. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Next up, we have Joe Walter.
Hi, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Great. Joe Walter from G2 Bremerton Housing Division, formerly Bremerton Housing Equity Advocates. We're doing something that lots of us talk about, joining forces, working together, so we've unified. And I just want to amplify what a couple of folks have said about public transit. I have lots of friends who are not driving cars by choice, and others who are looking at Bremerton about, do I want to be here, without a car? So maybe that's a thing for the sustainability committee to look at. I just want to support that idea of take it really seriously. I'm thinking about zoning too, that when you build a new residence, that there are parking requirements for that. Maybe we can lighten up on those a bit. The primary reason I came was to talk about the upcoming October 26th meeting, which some of you have already said you're going to attend, and others will be shortly receiving an invitation to. And it is around Jane's issue about what's happening on the MLK block. And I'll just read a flyer to you, which you'll be receiving soon. The title of the event is, "What Would MLK Do?" Join us for a solution-focused community dialogue about basic health and safety needs of our unhoused neighbors on Dr. Martin Luther King Way. Wednesday, October the 26th, from 10 a.m. until 2. Our focus is on the most basic health and safety issues, toilets and trash. Let's use our collective power to resolve problems that have felt insurmountable. Together, we can find solutions that support the dignity of the homeless folks on the block and the quality of life for everyone in the neighborhood. Bring your ideas, your enthusiasm, your research, your wisdom, and your compassionate heart. This is a hybrid meeting. In-person attendance is preferred, and others can attend via Zoom. It is a long meeting, because my fervent hope is that we can come out of this meeting with all of our questions answered and some clear solutions to present to those who can make our ideas for solutions happen. And I think it's going to be coming back to you, with people helping to answer this question that we've all felt embarrassed and uncomfortable about not being able to fix for so long. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walter. Is there anyone else for public recognition? Next up, we have Marwan Cameron.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. How are you doing this evening? Good evening, Council and Mayor. How are you doing this evening? Couple things. The main thing that I want to touch on tonight, and I have not had a time to gather my thoughts, but myself and several others were very dismayed at the recent REACT meeting that took place. It was very offensive to watch what happened in that meeting. It appears that the fervor and the dedication of racial justice and equity since the murder of George Floyd has seemed to wane, and people don't have the same zeal to do the work as they once protested that they did. Mayor, I don't know when this person is coming on that you're bringing on, but this person needs to take direction from REACT and look at things through a racial equity lens. And I'm asking you to not allow them to move the goalpost and move it from racial equity to everything else. That is often what is done in this country from the civil rights era on down, where they use stats. Even City.Council provided stats where Black people are harmed, looked at different demographics. Right now, currently, Black women are experiencing homelessness in the highest rates. And then all of a sudden, the resources and the conversation switches to every other demographic. So looking at things, especially our budget, through a racial equity lens is paramount, is critical, especially in this county and in the city. So I ask that you folks find and tap back into how you were feeling and how you wanted to move after the murder of George Floyd. The other thing that I would add is, as I run a transportation company as executive director of G2, a couple things are very important. We have several folks that are trying to pay their rent in a city that has no affordable housing. As such, bus service that ends at 8:30 at night, but they're working at restaurants and other locations, trying to make ends meet, have no way to get home, or they have to pay pretty high rates in order to do so. Same thing with no bus service on Sunday. So I ask you to look into those things and see what you can do about that. Joe Walter from G2 Housing talked about our event in October, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Is there anyone else for public recognition? Okay, last call. Okay, we'll be closing public recognition. Next up is public hearing. Do we have Angela or Miss Hoover back with us? Is Lori Smith available to pitch hit for this one?
I am.
Thank you.
So item 5A, public hearing for amending Title 20 of the Bremerton Municipal Code regarding cottage housing development, duplex and townhomes, bonus density for affordable housing development, and definition updates. Planning Manager Garrett Jackson is here to present.
Good evening, Council. Happy to be here tonight. Just want to start off making sure that everybody sees my presentation up on the screen. All right, I'm seeing some nodding heads, so thank you. All of our proposed zoning code amendments for this evening are from our infill toolkit and are intended to increase the types of housing that are permitted in the city. So our infill toolkit, there's the long name for that is the Assessment of Bremerton's Affordable Housing Policies and Regulations. This was originally published in 2018, and it's an analysis of the regulations in the city of Bremerton and that may be prohibitive to providing affordable housing. So since this was published in 2018, there's been a number of success stories that the council has adopted. I can go through a few of those now. The citywide density was raised to 6 dwelling units per acre. We relaxed regulations on accessory dwelling units. Now there's no owner-occupied requirement for accessory dwelling units, and any lot that allows for a single-family home in the city can also have 2 accessory dwelling units. Changes were made to allow for lot size averaging for subdivisions. So it made those lot sizes a little more variable. It relaxed standards for manufactured homes. Our minimum lot size in the R10 zone is 30 feet in width. It used to be that our regulations for manufactured homes required a minimum width that it wouldn't fit on the minimum lot size. So we adjusted manufactured home sizes so that they would be permitted on the minimum lot size in the city. And duplexes and townhomes are already permitted within 500 feet of a commercial district or center in the R10 zone. So currently, duplexes and townhomes are permitted in the R10 zone if within 500 feet. We're asking to extend that out to all of the R10 zone with this proposal. The city of Bremerton produced a joint affordable housing document with Kitsap County that also identifies duplex and townhomes and cottage housing as affordable housing strategies. That was published in March of 2020. And tonight's proposal for this, tonight's proposal for the affordable housing policies from the infill toolkit deals with 2 duplexes and townhomes in the low density residential zone, cottage housing in the low density R10 residential zone and medium density residential zone, R18, and permitting an affordable housing density bonus citywide, and also with some definition updates. So these updates are intended to address missing middle housing. The joint planning study from the city of Bremerton and Kitsap County defines missing middle housing as medium density housing like duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, courtyard style apartments, cottage clusters, or accessory dwelling units. These types of housing developments were largely outlawed in the post-war period in favor of single family housing units. So as you can see in the adjacent image, there are a lot of single family homes and apartment buildings being constructed in the city of Bremerton, but that missing middle housing segment of duplexes and townhomes isn't something that's being constructed in any great number within our city, and that's a portion of the housing stock that's missing from our affordable housing portfolio. Just today, I was in a meeting with Naval Base Kitsap leadership, and one of the Naval Base Kitsap employees was saying how with current prices, blue-collar shipyard workers can't afford to live in the city of Bremerton. And part of that affordability problem is the lack of missing middle housing. So first up to take a look at are the revised uses to promote infill of duplexes and townhomes in the LDR zone. So at every level of government, we are seeing a push to allow for increased housing types in order to promote affordable housing. What we have here offered is a fact sheet from the Biden-Harris administration at the federal level. There are some partisan tones to this document, which the city does not condone. We are merely offering this document up as a federal support document for reducing exclusionary zoning and encouraging the production of 2 and 4 unit properties in order to promote affordable housing. So that at the federal level, exclusionary zoning is being identified as counterproductive to providing affordable housing, and that 2 to 4 unit properties are something that we should promote. At the state level in Washington State, for a number of years, Washington State has been looking to potentially take the option out of local jurisdictions' hands and mandate that local jurisdictions provide for duplexes and triplexes and so forth within single-family home housing districts. This hasn't become law yet, but we are seeing from the state level that this is a way of providing affordable housing. At the county level, we've already discussed how the city of Bremerton and Kitsap County have come together in this joint affordability for housing project, which identifies these missing middle housing types and how important they are to affordable housing. And within our own urban growth areas, so urban growth areas are areas outside of city jurisdiction, but that are identified to one day be annexed by the city of Bremerton. So not within our jurisdiction, but identified as that we will annex them someday. So they're currently under the jurisdiction of Kitsap County. And within our urban growth areas, these uses are already permitted by Kitsap County. So if you drove through these areas that have the color in the map that you see on the screen, you'll very likely see duplexes, townhomes, and even apartment buildings throughout those zones, as they are either outright permitted or conditionally permitted in these zones within Kitsap County, within our urban growth area. So pointing out that this has already been adopted not only by our neighbors, but by lands that we will one day annex. And locally, we already have a number of provisions to encourage these types of housing. I'm going to go through the pictures that you see first and then address the code sections that are seen also. You'll see up on the screen, there's a few duplexes, and those are located on Lafayette Avenue. And those trees in the back that you see are Forest Ridge Park. There is a development of around 10 duplexes that were constructed in the early 2000s. And those would those areas since have been, the zoning has been changed to prohibit duplexes in that area. So while these were constructed in the early 2000s, they would now be not be permitted in that zone. You'll see next a picture of an attached single-family home on High Avenue. This, I believe this was constructed in 2018. And I believe anybody driving by or walking on the sidewalk would see this building and believe that it was a duplex. But it actually has a property line running right down the middle of this structure. So it's 2 single-family homes that share a common wall. And this is already an allowed development type within the city. And lastly, this is a single-family home with 2 accessory dwelling units built into a single structure on 13th Street by Bremerton High School. Now, I believe that anybody passing by on the street would assume that this is a single-family home, whereas this structure actually contains 3 independent dwelling units. So I point these examples out to show what's already existing in the city, what's already existing in city code to permit these, and also that line is really blurred on what we prohibit and what we allow. As we discussed earlier, per BMC 2060-060F, Duplexes and townhomes are already allowed in the R10 zone if you are within 500 feet of a commercial district or center. Per BMC 2058-060 D7, as part of a residential cluster development, which is a specialty subdivision type, townhomes are an allowed use already in the R10 zone. Per BMC 2060-020 J2, attached single-family homes are already allowed throughout the R10 zone. And per 2046-010, accessory dwelling units are allowed anywhere in the city where a single-family home is allowed to be built. So on any single-family lot, regardless of how large or small that lot is, you can build 3 dwelling units. This is a map that was requested by council at the study session. You'll see here in orange all the commercial areas within the city of Bremerton. Those are the commercial zones. So, and the black line represents 500 feet from those zones. And the area in yellow is the R10 zone. So this is just an illustrative example that a large portion of the R10 zone already permits duplexes and townhomes in the R10 zone. That being said, this is another map that illustrates in orange existing duplexes, triplexes, and apartments within the R10 zone. So that Lafayette example, those duplexes on Lafayette that were constructed in the 2000s but are no longer allowed in that zone. That's an example of duplexes, triplexes, and apartments that already exist in the R10 zone that would now be prohibited, and they are now non-conforming structures. So the main point of this map is to show that the continued prohibition may not make sense, as these uses are already prevalent throughout the zone. This is another map showing vacant properties that are large enough to develop 4 dwelling units or more. Why 4 dwelling units? It's because accessory dwelling units are allowed on every lot in the city. And there are development incentives that are very attractive for accessory dwelling units. You could build accessory dwelling units on any lot, regardless of the size. So they could have effectively a larger density than the proposals that are before you tonight. So you'll see that the areas in green are properties that are large enough to develop 4 residences or more, and that these properties are largely absent from the interior of the city and are for the most part on the periphery of the city. So while we are proposing to end the prohibition on duplexes and townhomes, admittedly, it may not have a very large impact because these properties are generally on the outside of the city, or outskirts, pardon me, of the city. And once again, these are recommendations for affordable housing that are well represented throughout our community and the country. In May of 2020, the Kitsap Association of Realtors put on a Kitsap Housing Summit, and the purpose of it was to discuss affordable housing options in Kitsap County and how do local jurisdictions increase affordable housing. One of the recommendations that came out of that report was to allow for duplexes and triplexes on single-family parcels. you'll see in the bar graph here on the screen that from the years of 1981 to 1999, the housing that was produced in Kitsap County was of a much greater a much greater number. And that the housing produced from 2000 to 2020 was far less. And that is part of the reason that we find ourselves in this affordability crisis, was just the sheer number of residential units was not on track to keep up with our growing population. And particularly what was absent is from 81 to 99, there was a much larger number of 2 to 4 unit dwellings that were created and 5+ unit structures that were created. We did receive some support from the Kitsap Association of Realtors, KCAR. We did receive a comment this evening that these changes will have a positive impact on the cost of housing. It will make housing units easier to produce, and the Kitsap County Association of Realtors is supportive of these measures. So just to review this one section, these strategies are already identified in our affordable housing strategy documents, whether that's our infill toolkit or the document we produced jointly with Kitsap County. We've identified affordable housing solutions at the federal, state, county, and local level that all point to duplexes and townhomes being part of the answer to providing affordable housing. And that currently they are permitted in the city with some prohibitions. These development types are currently found throughout the city already. So while they are prohibited now, they are already prevalent in our jurisdiction. And there may be a small impact, but it removes existing prohibitions, inhibiting potential affordable housing as we move forward. And that at the recommendation from the KCAR event for the Affordable Housing Summit was in support of duplexes and triplexes in the single family zoning district. Next up, I'd like to introduce our planner, Kate Millward, who's going to talk about cottage housing as an affordable housing option. The last time council saw this before the study session was a grant proposal, which was accepted by council for coming up with a cottage housing code. It was a $40,000 non-matching grant from the Department of Commerce to produce a cottage housing code. Take it away, Kate.
Thanks. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so cottage housing is a smaller scale neighborhood type of development that is similar to traditional neighborhoods in the United States, where there's single family houses on green spaces like yards. What it does is just create it on a smaller scale. So typically these are 4 or more clustered dwellings, and they orient toward a shared lawn or green space or open space or shared communal property of some kind. And they're pedestrian oriented, not automobile oriented. And this is to create a safer community. And these ordinances are typically accompanied by a density bonus, but that's not what we are going to propose. So the pictures on the right, you can see there's already a development on Snyder that is representative of cottage housing. It's several dwelling units on a shared lot. They're not always on a shared lot, as we'll see in the next slide, please. On Chico Way, which is in the county, it's also representative of what cottage housing looks like. Here it's subdivided, but we are proposing to not have these subdivided because that reduces the cost of the housing and also the process that people have to go through to develop the housing for this. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the definition that we are adding is for cottage housing development is that it means a lot containing more than one principal conventional dwelling unit. Units shall not be greater than 1,200 gross square feet and shall not share any common walls, ceilings, or floors with other principal conventional dwelling units. Again, these have an orientation that's specific to this development type. So structures shall be oriented to the street or shared open space and limited to clusters of no more than 12 units. And that number particularly comes from research done for adjacent municipalities, and in the area, it's a typical number that limits how many houses are there so that community can grow in a healthier way. The code includes an open space requirement of 400 square feet of open space per dwelling. And it also includes the parking requirement, which is slightly reduced of 1.5 parking spaces per unit. Next slide, please. This type of housing comes with design standards. So the code proposes that they include a requirement for front porches with a minimum dimension of 6 foot depth and 10 foot length. And again, this fosters community and orientation toward the lawn and the development of this shared space. In the code, nonconformities are accounted for. An existing home not conforming to cottage housing standards may remain on the lot. And the procedure for this would be as follows. In a low density residential R10 zone, when there's 3 units or fewer, outright permitted when meeting all criteria of approval. And when it's 4 units or more, a conditional use permit is required. And then in the medium density residential zone, the R18, it's outright permitted when meeting all criteria of approval. Next slide, please. All right.
Thank you, Kate. Our next topic is a bonus density for religious organizations. Now, this is a mandate from the state. State of Washington, per RCW 3670A 545, requires that jurisdictions provide a density bonus to religious organizations if it's exclusively for low-income housing, and that there would be a time restriction for no less than 50 years, and that housing can't discriminate against any person who qualifies. So that being said, there aren't a lot of criteria within the state RCW, and it's really left up to local jurisdictions to negotiate as proposals come forward. So to avoid that, the city is requesting, staff is proposing to have a 50% density bonus for qualifying projects, and that the applicant be a religious organization as defined by RCW 2604-007 or the Bremerton Housing Authority. So the Bremerton Housing Authority is the only nonprofit we are currently recommending be included in this code provision, as they have an incredible track record for creating affordable housing in the city. We have a letter of support that's shown from the Bremerton Housing Authority on the screen, supporting these proposed amendments. In particular, because at the moment, the Bremerton Housing Authority isn't able to use all of its 1,900 housing choice vouchers to provide affordable housing for those that qualify. Currently, there just isn't enough housing to use these vouchers, and the Bremerton Housing Authority in part supports these amendments in the hope that more housing that will apply to these vouchers would be constructed. As far as procedure is concerned, this would require a conditional use permit, and the criteria of approval would be that they meet all other city standards. So whether that's parking, utilities, or traffic mitigation or other measures, these housing types would need to meet all other city codes. This does not apply to congregate living facilities. All units are affordable as defined by RCW 8414-010, and that we would require a notice to title that encumbers the property for a period of 50 years, and that the housing provided on that property is required to be affordable. And that the development would also be required to consult with Kitsap Transit on any appropriate transit services that would be required of the development. And also that the housing be non-discriminatory. Now, at the study session, there was some feedback provided on what that definition of discrimination should be. And so you will see that the bolded and underlined language was added, and I'll go ahead and read this in its entirety, that these developments would not be able to discriminate. The affordable housing development does not discriminate against any person who qualifies as a member of a low-income household based on race, creed, religion, lack of creed or religion, color, national origin, sex, gender identity, gender expression, veteran or military status, sexual orientation, or mental or physical disability, or otherwise act in violation of the Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. So when speaking to our city attorney, she recommended that I point out a definitional change that is already in this ordinance. The RCW 3670A545, which deals with the density bonus, defers the definition of religious organizations to a different RCW. So they point to religious organizations being defined in RCW 3601-290. Now, the definition of religious organization is buried in 5 pages of RCW that deals specifically with religious organizations hosting homeless encampments. So we thought that it would be confusing to point to this specific RCW. The proposed ordinance instead defines religious organization per RCW 2604-007. And this is how the city of Tacoma has framed their density bonus. So they point to this alternative definition, which can be seen on the screen here, in their density bonus ordinance. I'm going to read both of those out loud so that council can, make an informed decision per our city attorney. These are all, by the way, have been vetted by the Planning Commission. But per the homeless encampment, RCW, religious organization means the federally protected practice of a recognized religious assembly, school, or institution that owns or controls real property. The proposed ordinance definition, which is also used by the city of Tacoma, defines religious organization as includes but is not limited to churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, non-denominational ministries, interdenominational and ecumenical organizations, mission organizations, faith-based social agencies, and other entities whose principal purpose is the study, practice, or advancement of religion. And lastly, for our topics, definition modification of maximum density. So I'm going to read the definition of maximum density. Maximum density means the maximum number of dwelling units allowed per the net buildable acreage as stated for each zone. Where not specified in a zone chapter, no maximum density shall apply. So we are proposing to strike the word net and instead have gross buildable acreage. This is a much more common sense approach that the public much more easily understands. As an example of that on the screen, you'll see a gross acre and an example of a net acre. Our examples are used in the R10 zone where 10 dwelling units per acre is the maximum density. So a gross acre is very easy to understand how many dwelling units are allowed on your property. If you have a 1 acre property, you are allowed to have 10 dwelling units. Gross acre, easy, very straightforward. Net acre is a little harder to understand. So if you have 1 acre, but portions of that acre are encumbered. Now, whether that is with roads, critical areas, or their buffers, utility easements, if there is an unbuildable area, you have to subtract that from the maximum number of dwelling units permitted on your property. In this example, there is 0.3 acres that are encumbered and 0.7 acres remaining. So whereas you may have 1 acre, you get 7 dwelling units instead of a gross acre, 10 dwelling units. Now, here's another example. So with our proposed housing changes for duplexes and townhomes and cottage housing, these are potentially much more compact development types. Single family housing requires more area to construct. The example number 1, you see a site plan for single family homes. Each one is required to have side yard setbacks that pushes the distance of the dwelling units apart from one another. This takes up more area. Each unit has an independent driveway. That also demands more area to construct. With these proposed zoning code amendments, you could build a more compact living situation in less area. But you couldn't necessarily do that under our current definition, which requires net buildable acres. So in this example, if you were on a half acre and a third of that, and a portion of that is encumbered with, say, a wetland or wetland buffer and a utility easement, if it were a half acre of gross, you could potentially have 5 dwelling units. But on a net acreage system, even though there may be room for those units, they would be prohibited from being constructed. It should be noted too that we are the only jurisdiction in Kitsap County that bases their maximum density off of net acreage. Public notice. So we did have a pretty robust public notice for these zoning code amendments. That included 3 separate planning commission meetings. It started with a planning commission meeting in April of 2022. And then in May of 2022, I met with the Kitsap Housing and Homeless Coalition, specifically because they have a number of agencies that provide housing throughout Kitsap County. And this was the best way to get in front of as many organizations as possible to explain these upcoming zoning code amendments. This includes both organizations like Housing Kitsap and the Bremerton Housing Authority, and also religious organizations like the Catholic Housing Services or Ohana Housing Ministries. We spoke with the Kitsap Building Association in a meeting in July and explained that these proposed zoning code amendments and found support there. There was a planning commission meeting in June, and that was a workshop, and that was followed up by a public hearing in July. City e-news was sent out on Facebook, Twitter, and other electronic medium from the city on September 2nd. A mailer to religious organizations was sent on September 2nd, and that was followed up on with an email. And a mailer to every property in the R10 and R18 zone was mailed out September 14th, 15th, and 16th. It was a mailer of nearly 7,000 individual notices, and that took quite a bit of processing time. Housing Kitsap and Homelessness Coalition was again visited today to let them know that all these housing organizations, to let them know that the hearing was tonight and to follow up on from the initial meeting in May. This is what the notice to the religious organizations looked like that was sent out in the mailer. Here is the trifold mailer that was sent out to every member of the R10 and R18 zones. It should be noted that there was an error, that the meeting tonight started at 5 p.m. So my apologies to any member of the public in the audience that had to wait for the meeting to start. And once again, the Kitsap Housing and Homelessness Coalition. These proposed zoning code amendments were unanimously recommended to the City Council, where they recommended that the council hold an open record public hearing, consider testimony, and approve the proposed amendments. We have a recommended motion that is also in your packets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Also, thank you to Ms. Millward, who presented on cottage housing. The purpose of the public hearing is to accept public comment. And so at this time, we'd like to open it up to members of the public who wish to comment on this item. And first up, we have Jesse Adams.
Hello, I am Jesse Adams. I live in District 6. Many of your pictures today were near my house, which was kind of cool to see. I learned of this public notice from the mailer, and I came here today to say yes in my backyard. The proposed zoning changes are a step in the right direction, but I'm wondering, what are the next steps? Can we remove single-family zoning in Bremerton in the spirit of the state of Oregon's HB 2001? Would the City Council encourage Kitsap County to adopt a land value tax rather than our current proposed tax structure? And yeah, that's my, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Next up, we have Jeffrey Kelnan.
Thank you for allowing me to talk tonight. I want to actually thank Mr. Jackson for his responses to all my previous emails. He's been extremely professional and clear. My concern is, as a landlord of affordable housing within the downtown area and the R10 area, which I have a vacant lot available for development. It's a 50 by 100 square foot lot, 5,000 square feet, but it appears that a duplex would be not allowed in that area under the new based on density. If they could be more specific about R10, 5,000 square foot lot based on density, would a duplex be allowed to be built?
Thank you, Mr. Calnan. Just a reminder, this is not generally a Q&A period, so I definitely encourage you to follow up with another email to Mr. Jackson.
Absolutely. Thank you for that clarification. And I will post that question out. And I want to encourage everyone to realize that most of the city lots in downtown Bremerton are 50 by 100, and small duplexes would be a great value for affordable housing if allowed in that area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calnan. Next up, we have Gina.
Hi, I have a vacant lot over on Beach Drive. I had talked to Mr. Younger about this several years ago when we wanted to build all this road. It's like an alleyway that just has duplexes on it. And I was told that we were not able to build another duplex. So it's been sitting vacant all these years waiting for something like this to happen. So I am really hoping that this does go through.
Thank you, Gina. Next up, we have Kathy T. Bradley.
Hello, thank you all for hosting this public hearing. Yeah, I got a flyer in the mail asking to join this public hearing, and I really appreciated that flyer. Like, that was very perfect. And also thank you, Garrett Jackson and Kate Millward, for putting on that information session. I came here not really knowing what to expect, but that was a lot of information that was really wonderful. And I really appreciate you all putting together that information to explain the complexities of what's going on. And yes, I just wanted to come here and say I absolutely support all these changes. I was super excited when I read this flyer. As someone, I moved to Bremerton recently, and I'm at 30 and I'm a first-time homeowner finally. And honestly, it just feels lucky. And so I personally would love if others' journeys to own property wasn't as hard as mine, and there was more options other than single family homes. And yeah, my only concern that I sort of mentioned earlier in the public recognition part was just my main concern is, again, just like parking requirements. I know that's like a future issue. That's not really the point of this proposal right now, but my hope in the future for Bremerton and honestly all cities is that hopefully a car is not someone's only means of transportation. There's that public transit is a more attractive option, and all these parking spaces that are required for these cottage homes or multifamily homes maybe become less useful or less precious and eventually are no longer required. So thank you all again for all you're doing. And yeah, again, just to reiterate, super support this whole proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Next up, we have Sue Flan. Hopefully I said the name right.
Hi, this is Susan Flan, and I really appreciate the meeting tonight. I'd like to echo the thanks to Mr. Jackson and Ms. Millward for their information. I'm especially excited about the opportunity to develop cottages, because I think that they create a really nice neighborhood feel as opposed to, really tall buildings and something with no outdoors. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that. We do own some property on Marion Avenue that has nearly an acre, so I'm curious what that will take. And I guess this is in form of a suggestion, but it could also be a question, because many of us small landowners are not professional developers. I would find it to be really helpful, and I'm sure I wouldn't be the only one, if some sort of informational resources could be put together for people like ourselves about what it would take. What are the steps to consider adding, a couple of cottages or a duplex to a piece of land if you have the space for it. So thank you very much, and that's all I have to say. I'm in favor of passing your recommendations. Sounds good.
Thank you, Ms. Flan. Next up, we have Mike Nystrom.
Thank you. It's actually Mike and Lisa Nystrom, and I'm going to let my wife speak first, or she's going to speak first. There's no letting.
Thank you. So, this is great. There's so many important issues nowadays to address, and I can see that housing and stuff is very important. What I'm not hearing, as we're trying to make room, is let me just, so I'm a longtime resident. My grandparents moved here in the 40s. And my father was World War II vet, 99, recently passed away. So I was born and raised here. And one thing that Kitsap County has that very few places in the world have is the beauty, the land. This is the evergreen state. My concern is that while we are addressing these issues, we are slowly becoming the used to be green state. That it's a monopoly game of how much can we pack in an area without thinking, how can we preserve the things that make a community a community? People come over to the Kitsap Peninsula because they're stressed, because they live in cement cities. Bellevue, if you haven't been over there, has a lake downtown. And you know why you'd never know? Is because no one protected it while everything grew up around it. Kitsap County, especially Bremerton, is one of those beautiful, beautiful places where every blue collar worker could drive downtown and you could see across to Manette. You can see the top of Mount Rainier, and you go across the bridges and you see the Olympics, and everyone enjoys it. It's what you live for. It's what makes living in a middle class community makes you feel rich. And it's the land and the beauty that nurtures everyone here. And as we slowly erode that away, I hope that that's taken into consideration, that the views, we don't continue to hide the beauty with high, expensive things that block the view, like downtown. The direction is not good. And as we're going down Highway 303, that as we're making affordable housing, we don't become like between Tacoma and Seattle, where you've lost all the green, the things that made it wonderful to live here. Otherwise, you just have a Pottersville where we've crammed in as many places as we can, but nobody really wants to live there. The only people that live here will be the ones that can't afford to move out. So if while we're cramming these places in, if we can make sure that there's some green areas, you have developers that when they're clearing all the land, that they don't cut down any more than they need to. You can leave the existing forest. You don't have to replant with new, so that we preserve the most valuable thing that Bill Gates, no one else can buy, but we're slowly eroding of why people want to live here. It makes it okay to live in a blue collar community because of its beauty. Bremerton will keep giving to us as long as we take care of her and we don't exploit her and use her as a commodity, so that everyone benefits, everybody, even those that will live in these small cottage communities, will be proud to be from a community that retains its beauty, retains its green, retains its areas for everybody to see and not blocked for the wealthy. I don't hear this being addressed as we do it, and it can be done. I see Gig Harbor, when they make their downtowns, they don't just clear cut everything down. They bring in the developers that keep existing green and build around it. Other areas do this, and I hope that Bremerton recognizes the value of what we have that no other place in this area, not Bellevue, not Seattle. And if we develop at the expense that they have, pretty soon no one will want to live here either. They're going to want to go to the next place before they exploit it. So if we can get growth that's sustainable and retain the beauty that benefits everybody that lives here. And I would hope that that's taken into consideration. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Nystrom. So for this public hearing, and I'm going to pause. I know, Mr. Nystrom, you're next. There's two things that I'd like to say. First of all, we would like to try to keep comments to 3 minutes for each participant, and then we can circle back if there's other comments. The second thing that I need to clarify is that I made a mistake earlier when I said this is not typically a Q&A session. City staff are absolutely welcome to address questions if they feel like they have answers. And so apologies for that miscommunication. So Mr. Nystrom, I think you're up.
Yeah, I'm not nearly as eloquent. Just to reiterate what Lisa said, really, it's just to keep the feeling of a community, and to not lose sight that we develop and incentivize green areas within the zoning, within the building permitting, so that we're just not clear cutting. There are so many examples driving around Kitsap County. There's one on Wagga Way going towards Central Valley where, we've lived for, before the Bremerton house. And it's like 50 houses going up, off the side of the highway, and it's all clear cut. Not a single tree remained. And I don't know if it's, affordable housing or not. Low 400s. I don't know if that's affordable. Doesn't sound like it to me. But, it's an example. And the parking, and I understand incentivizing public transit, but to not take into account the reality of today, if you allow 1.5 houses or cars per resident, but people have 2 or 3, all that does is push all the cars out onto the street. And it makes, and you drive by these neighborhoods and there's nobody parking in the neighborhoods because they don't have parking. They're all parking along the public street. And so, you gotta look at unintended consequences of this and what are you really incentivizing? So I encourage you to take into account that, and in our Bremerton area, someone built an additional unit just, and blocked part of our view. And there's no room to park cars on that lot. So they're parking on the street, another home parking on the street. It just crowds the street. And that's the reality, of, it may make it easier to zone it by dropping the parking requirement or to build, but it just pushes all the problem onto the street. And so anyway, I'd like you to, take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nystrom. Next up, we have Jessica Ferris. Please correct me if I said your name wrong.
That's okay. It's Jessica Ferris. So I'm here to just have a public comment to say that I support this initiative. I guess I don't know if these are necessarily questions or concerns, but one of the things that I am interested in knowing more about is it's already been presented previously, but the increase in public transportation, I do think that that's a concern. I'm a huge advocate for public transportation in general. This is one of the first places that I've really lived that I have required to have a car because I have lived in previous places that I could take a bus or a subway to. And so I think increasing public transportation opportunities and availability would really be great, especially if there is a conversation around increasing density. The other thing that I have is concern or question I have is if there is increased options for housing, how will Bremerton City possibly keep rents controlled or rent controlled or decrease or limit the increase in rent? I feel like my rent has been increased over the past year by a lot, and that's kind of concerning because I'm, just I would like to continue living here, and I feel in some ways that I'm being pushed out of the housing that I have, the apartment that I live in. So I guess I don't know if it needs to be addressed right now, but something for City Council to consider that if there is increase in housing, how will they possibly decrease rents or keep it somewhat stabilized so that they don't continue to go through the roof every year? And I guess my other comment is that I actually am, to be kind of bold, is that I kind of oppose all these NIMBY arguments that are currently happening now because actually increasing density would preserve the green spaces within Kitsap County if you are not incorporating and keep developing these single family houses, then actually these green spaces can continue to be preserved. And I feel like this conversation about limiting or not wanting density is other red flags for concerns that aren't actually about housing, but are actually about other things. So I think that it's my only comment that I have, and thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Ferris. Next up, we have Vadim.
Hi, it's Vadim Kogan.
Vadim, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for the presentation. It was really helpful to watch and kind of engage with the information. I got the mailer. I wanted to be part of this. I moved to Bremerton in 2019. I was originally living in Boston, Chicago before this. I've seen my rent increase pretty substantially from about $1,300 to close to $2,000 now, just in a couple of years. So I do give my support to this initiative, increasing the supply of housing in Bremerton, especially with this, with an increased density. I hope will result in decreased rents or more affordable housing being available. I commend you all for putting this together. I don't think, as Jessica had mentioned before, I don't necessarily think that this is going to result in the degradation of the green space of Bremerton. I do think that that's a big pull for the county. I hope that with more dense housing, we will actually reduce the amount of single-family units that we're building and the amount of environmental degradation that we're putting upon the county. One of the things I wanted to talk about is just because we have a larger supply of housing doesn't necessarily mean that the rents will decrease or the cost of housing will decrease as well. So it's one of the things I wanted to flag for the council here is this is a great step and I support it. Once that is done, how are you going to ensure that given this increased supply, we're not just building, luxury units that are going to be unaffordable for the majority of the population here, especially given the fact that Washington is growing pretty quickly, as is Bremerton. So thank you all.
Thank you, Vadim Kogan. Next up, we have Jane Robolowski.
Hello. First, I have a question that I'd like planning staff to answer. When you're changing net versus gross acreage, you mentioned that if there were wetlands on the property, that wouldn't count. So let's say somebody has what's now considered an unbuildable lot because 80% is wetlands or wetland buffer. Are you still proposing that they could have 10 units on that 1 acre? And just a question.
So she directly asked me a question. Generally, we wait for the chair to say, staff, please answer that question. But as it seems to be a bit uneven, I'm happy to answer this question. And chair, please direct me in the future if you'd like me to answer individual questions. Thank you. That being said, for protocol, there are other guiding development factors that will prohibit development in the situation that you're referencing. So if there is a wetland buffer, there is still only if there is no developable area or a very limited developable area, you can still only develop in that small area. And then it takes practicality takes over at that point. Every single family home requires 2 parking spaces. The maximum height in the low density residential zone is 35 feet. The maximum development coverage is 60% of your lot. So can be 60% of a lot can be covered with impervious surfaces. None of those standards are proposed to be changed as it would apply to these housing types. Duplexes require 2 parking spaces per unit. Triplexes count as multifamily, and I believe that they are parking is based on the number of bedrooms. That isn't proposed to change. Cottage housing is 1.5 spaces is proposed, but my point is that you can only develop for what is practical on the lot. So you wouldn't be able to fit 10 dwelling units into a small developable area. And a point that I failed to make earlier is as the proposal for duplexes and townhomes and cottage housing will not increase density. The maximum density in the R10 zone will continue to be 10 dwelling units per acre. It's just housing types that are allowed. So I thought that I would make that point while addressing your concern.
Thank you. I'm all for, changing the density and allowing in duplexes, triplexes, cottage housing. That's all fine. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse yet again. We have the worst transit of any place I've ever lived in life. I've lived all over the country, even in rural areas. I had better bus service than we do here. So, for years and years and years, all we've done is support Kitsap Transit to become a ferry service and have everybody in the county pay and very few people using. We have terrible, terrible bus service. So that needs to be one of the major steps that we work on. And I don't care if we take all of our REIT money and just get circulator buses for Bremerton alone and just get back to when we had Bremerton Bus Company. I mean, it's awful service. So you can't just keep giving tax abatements for luxury apartments and then be surprised that there's nothing affordable, because when they charge $1,800 for a studio, every other landlord in town is like, okay, I'm raising my rent. And that is a big part of why rents have gone up dramatically, is by these luxury apartments that we still haven't made any change on, that aren't paying property tax or paying very small tax. So those are some things that should be addressed also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robolowski. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for the clarification on protocol. For those who don't know out there, this is my first time chairing a meeting, so I'm sort of learning on the job some of the protocol, and I appreciate your patience. Next up, we have Gray.
Yeah, hello. Good evening. Thanks for hosting this meeting. I live in, I believe, the 6th district with Mr. Goodnow. But yeah, I'm all for progress. I'm all for people being able to rely less on cars in this town and rely more on bikes. It's nice seeing the bike lanes. It'll be even nicer when Naval Avenue goes on its road diet, so we can get a good example here in town of what a good road diet is. Anyway, yeah, I'm all for it. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to hear me out.
Thank you, Gray. Next up, we have Joe Walter. Joe Walter, are you there?
I am. Can I be heard now?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you again. I think I'm understanding the proposal. And of course, my biggest concern is around low-income housing. Thank you for adding the Bremerton Housing Authority to the folks who will get the exception along with other charities. And that looks like affordable housing to me, I hope. And I am concerned that we are lightening the requirements for development. And I think I'm echoing what some others have said, and that what we are doing is creating more housing without any confidence that it will mean more low-income housing. If I'm understanding the cottage development idea, it makes me think of something like the Habitat development on, is it Arsenal? Where it's a bunch of little houses that are around a central courtyard where the kids can play and it feels like community and looks like community. My concern is that we're now just making it easier for developers to produce very expensive tiny homes. I'm not sure how if we have any ways to set limits on how much they're going to sell these houses for. And in the duplex idea, I saw the one where we had a property line going down the center of a house. Certainly, I'm concerned that we're creating more housing without enough consideration for being sure that the people that, like, what is the number? What represents a single family home? Is it $400,000? I understand for renting that we're trying to aim for 30% of your income will pay for your housing costs, and nobody is getting that. But at least that's clear for me as far as rentals go. So I hope you'll keep those concerns in mind and not just make it easier for developers to create money-making opportunities that don't necessarily serve the deepest needs of our community. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Walter. Next up, we have Jesse Adams. You're welcome to speak. Oh, Adams? Do we have Jesse Adams anymore? Okay, I saw the hand go down and back up, but I'd like to invite Jesse Adams in for the next public comment.
Sorry, I never got unmuted there.
Oh, I'm sorry. We can hear you loud and clear now.
Okay. Sustainable growth is good. Green space is good. You cannot have affordable housing without building up. Unaffordable housing creates human misery. Dense housing minimizes urban sprawl and preserves green space. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, next is Ed Cunningham.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for taking my call. I just want to say I voted for Greg, and I appreciate what he's done. And he walked around my neighborhood, and I spoke with him, and I really appreciate what he stood for. And I spoke to him at that time about certain issues, and one of those issues was crime in the area, and I wanted to see what we're going to do about addressing the crime and with more density. I lived in the inner cities before. I've lived in Boston. I've lived in Phoenix. I've lived in downtown Seattle. I've lived in a lot of big cities, and with a lot of density issues, there's a lot more crime. And is that going to be how are they going to address that issue? Other thing is, when my neighborhood is there was a house that was just recently sold, and it was by insurance. Insurance salesman bought the house, and he put 3 houses on the property, cut down all the old growth trees, and the skyline that was there of all trees and stuff. It was a big lot. It's all gone, and now it's just houses, and so the skyline that I bought my house for, and the way I bought the neighborhood and why I moved here, is no longer what it is. It's no longer a representation of the original neighborhood. And I'm afraid that that's going to happen with more development and more business coming in and trying to maximize their profits with these cottages or these houses. And I agree with other speakers where the question is there any planning structure code, or where they have to have, is it going to be eyesight? Is it going to be eyesores? Is it going to be just where everybody has a free for all and they can do what they want? And then, when you develop and maximize the density, there's going to be people that move in the area that have not always the best purposes. And I only know this because I've lived in those neighborhoods, and I just don't want that to happen to this area. I came here in like 2009, and Bremerton had changed a lot in the last 10 years, and it's gotten better, a lot better with the leadership. I just don't want it to go back just in order to make profits for these business owners or owners of properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak on this issue? Let's see, we have, I see a hand up, but it's from a council member. I'm still in public, in the public comment, public hearing portion. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this? Okay, seeing none, I close public hearing. So the next thing on the agenda is to go to the council for a motion. However, I'd like to take the temperature of the group to find out if there's a desire to take a 4-minute break. After hearing all of what we've heard from public comment, I feel like maybe it's a good idea to step away and digest all the really great information. So I'm just kind of getting thumbs up. Any other council members not like to take a 5-minute break? Okay. So, Mr. Sorensen, what do we do next for a 5-minute break?
All right, I'll pause recording.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Right. They are going to take a 5-minute break. Definitely a lot going on in this particular meeting here. Definitely need to make your voice heard. It is critical, terribly important. I missed a piece, so I don't know if they talked about what are the long-term goals in changing some of these policies. We know what our need is here, right? We have our point in time count. We know that those numbers are typically 2 to 2.5 to 3 times more. That's just for the homeless population. But then we know that many folks are living in a situation where their housing is not affordable. And that is a bigger problem that needs to be addressed. And my concern is while this might be a nice first step, we must really do some more radical thinking at this point in time. We don't have time, right? I was saying earlier today, I got up at about 4:30 this morning, and it was about 14 degrees above freezing. It was 46 or 48 degrees this morning. Still September 21st. It's concerning, right? The Fed just raised the rate. We are in a recession. We still have COVID. We have eviction assistance funds expiring. We have wages not keeping up with the cost of living. And you're even hearing from naval-based Kitsap that their shipyard workers are finding it difficult to pay for their housing in Bremerton. Now we're talking about folks that are making $25, $30, $35, $40 an hour. So for you and your family that are working at Denny's, Uber, the college, your wages aren't even touching that. God forbid if you have childcare costs on top of that. So if they're struggling and they're complaining, what are a good portion of folks here in this community going to do? And they have to address both things, right? You can't, I know there's some advocation saying, hey, you know what? We don't need parking, right? Just build, build, build. And, I disagree with that. See, there's a lot of isms. And one of those isms is ableism. Are you physically able to use the transportation as it is set. Everyone doesn't have that luxury.
Okay, council members, are we ready to go?
All right, more soon.
Jeff's ready to go. Eric's ready to go. See, this is the risk we take in taking a break, is coming back late. Okay, I see Councilmember Mockman is back. And so we are just waiting on Councilmember Fry, and Councilmember Dennehy. Are you in the house? I think we'll go ahead and start the recording again.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. I call the meeting back to order. Next up, we will now go to the council for a motion. And I'd like to recognize Councilmember Coughlin.
Well, thank you, Vice President. Yeah, I will move to pass ordinance number 5458 as recommended by the Planning Commission to amend Bremerton Municipal Code section Title 20 related to duplex, townhomes, cottage housing, bonus density, and definitions.
And is there a second? Councilmember Dennehy?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second, and we are now open for discussion. Councilmember Coughlin, I'd like to recognize you.
All right, thank you, Council Vice President. So first off, I just want to give a huge thanks to you, Mr. Jackson and Ms. Ward, for really an excellent presentation. I think hearing from everybody, it was extremely clear and informative. And just a big thank you to everyone else who has worked hard on this code, including the mayor. And thanks so much to the Planning Commission for having multiple meetings and a lot of work on this and their recommendation. And finally, it was just great to see so many people writing in and speaking up on this. I think it might be a record in at least the time I've been on. So thank you so much to everybody. I have, Mr. Jackson, just a few questions. I just kind of want to address some of the concerns that we got from some of the folks who were hesitant about this. Specifically for parking, can you remind me if I got it right, the cottage housing requires 1.5 parking spaces per unit. And then can you say the duplex and triplex one more time, as you remember?
Absolutely. Yeah. Cottage housing was 1.5 parking spaces per unit. Duplexes were 2 parking spaces per unit. And a townhome or a triplex, multifamily, that is 1.5 per unit if there are 1 or less bedrooms. And if there are 2 bedrooms, it's 1.75 parking spaces per unit. And a multi-unit residential of 3 or more bedrooms requires 2 per unit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I know this is always tricky. Parking minimums are a hot topic of discussion, and in my opinion, it's always finding that middle ground. You require too many parking spaces and nothing gets built, too few, and as folks are worried, the streets get crowded. But to me, those seem like reasonable numbers. For concerns about junk cars on property, if I remember right, the Bremerton code currently prohibits like abandoned vehicles on property, and we have a code enforcement program in place for that. Is that right?
That's correct. And I can put the Bremerton 1 number in the chat for anyone who has code enforcement issues.
Perfect. And that's also not just junk cars, but also different aspects of the house, say like in really severe disrepair.
It depends on the level of repair, but we'd be happy to engage with members on the public on the individual cases.
Perfect. Okay. And nothing in this code is increasing the height limit or changing the underlying height limit for any zones, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then for the green space concerns, which I really appreciate. I mean, I know we have some amazing parks in the city, but there's other green spaces as well. This is a really broad question, but in all of our planning documents and zoning, there are some provisions in different places to create a certain amount of green space in certain zones. Is that roughly right?
For residential cluster developments, they require open space and multifamily projects. in most zones require open space.
Okay, fantastic. And then if folks really wanted to kind of weigh in on changing that, we have the comprehensive plan update coming in next year with a lot of public input. And so would that be a good place for them to kind of speak up if they want to, make sure we preserve green space and have more of it?
Absolutely. And I can put how to comment for the comprehensive plan in the chat also.
Oh, perfect. And then for some of the transportation concerns, especially public transit, that comprehensive plan update will also include, have transportation as a big component, right?
We'll be coordinating with Kitsap Transit with our comprehensive plan update and forwarding any comments we get on transit to our transportation professionals with the city of Bremerton and Kitsap Transit.
Perfect. And then last question was, I think it was the first public comment we got before the answer. So for a downtown 5,000 square foot lot, if this code is adopted, will that allow a duplex to be added, or is there still something in the future to look at for that?
And I had asked IT to add to the chat previously that if anyone has development questions on how to develop their lot, if you need a contractor or a consultant, I provided a link to the Kitsap Building Association. We're not allowed to recommend any individual contractor or service. And if anyone has questions about their individual lot in the city of Bremerton, please contact Kate Millward for any zoning information. I can't give you a specific answer because I don't know exactly which zone in the downtown sub-area plan or if they're in the downtown sub-area plan. But we would love to work with individual property owners on what's permitted on individual lots.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. I'll just wrap up with my thoughts on this, which is, and I forgot one last thank, which was to the mayor and DC for sending out the postcards. It obviously worked for bringing in some folks, and to Council Member Younger for suggesting that. So looking back in grad school, I realized I lived in cottage housing. I didn't know the name for it at the time, but it was a small unit I shared with a roommate, and I was grateful that was there because it was probably the only place I could have afforded at that time. And I think I've definitely seen the need for more housing, especially this missing middle housing. I think the more units we can get, especially affordable units, from the data I've seen, that does decrease prices. I really do value the concerns about growth and kind of losing community, especially like the Manette neighborhood in my district is a really special, unique and vibrant place. But I do keep in the back of my head that as a city, I don't think we can choose not to grow, not just because we always have people moving here and being born here, but literally the city has certain goals we need to meet to accommodate growth. And so I always go back to, we have to grow somehow, and there's a couple options. Some of them are, you could take an area like Manette and plop down a bunch of large apartment buildings and high rises, and I don't think anyone would want that. As other people said, you could just keep expanding and take all that green space out with a bunch of single family homes. But this option of these missing middle housing, affordable units of increasing density without changing the character of the neighborhood really seems to me an ideal solution, especially for areas like Manette. And I'll wrap with just saying I appreciate all the other concerns that this isn't going to solve skyrocketing rents and housing prices overnight. It's another tool in the toolbox, but I think it does make a difference. So I'm happy to stop talking and listen to my fellow council members' thoughts on it. But I so far think this is a great tool. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Councilmember Coughlin. So for protocol, I'm going to ask, am I supposed to call on Councilmember Dennehy because he seconded it? Okay, I'm going to go. I see you were next, Councilmember Montclair, but I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Councilmember Dennehy and then to you.
I'll be brief, Councilperson Montclair. Thank you so much to Mr. Jackson, to Mayor Wheeler, to Director Spencer for all the work on this. I think anything that we can do as a city government to increase density and use of vacant land in Bremerton is really the only thing that's going to lower housing prices. I bought with my husband in 2017, which was only 5 years ago, and our house has doubled in price to the point where if we were buying at our salaries at 32 again, we would not be able to afford the house that we're in at this point. So I really want to do everything that I can to help folks stay in this community and also move to this community, encouraging artists, encouraging people working in the service industry, all of those people that make it a very vibrant community I do not want to see Bremerton be turned into a Bellevue. It's quite sterile, and it loses a lot of characters. I commend the administration for thinking outside of the box with this one, and I hope to see more proposals that increase density and housing stock, which will lower rents and lower housing prices. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dennehy. Next up, we have Councilmember Montclair.
Thanks, Vice President Chamberlain. So this has been a really interesting hearing, and I join with others in commending the mayor and the administration in putting together so many opportunities for public comment, and especially for the flyer, which was great. I even got a call from a constituent today saying, I didn't get one of these. Apparently the person who owns this property lives out of town, but it's all over Instagram and various other things. So this was a very effective method, and I commend you all. Thank you. There have been several themes that I've noted on this, and one is the I think one member of the public called it the degradation of green space. And in my opinion, as you all know, because I've said so many times, that preservation of especially existing large native trees is not only compatible with dense housing, but actually adds value to it, as has been shown in several studies, one of which at least I sent to all of you. It actually adds value to the property to preserve the existing trees on space. Sadly, our current landscaping standards, in my opinion, sadly, chapter 20.50, the intent is to preserve the large native trees, and that's stated right at the beginning. But the actual development standards call for just a reference to, I think, the horticulturalists or arborists list. Am I correct on that, Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, the retention of trees is encouraged, but not mandatory.
Yeah, the preservation of trees is specifically referred to an arboriculturalist, which is a new word for me. I'll just go with arborist, which is a word I know and know how to use, who is hired by the person developing the property. And my fear here is, because I worked for so many years with people who assessed hazard trees, and many of them, one gentleman told me that all trees are hazard trees. It is very easy to find people like that. And it's a very minor flaw in a beautifully intentioned chapter of our city code. And the administration is bound by this code. So I would call for a change to that code that would permit both this dense housing and the preservation, not of every single tree in every single place, but it's a welcoming thing to have trees. It adds to the beauty of the community. I know this sounds outlandish, but many studies have been done, even on projects in Chicago, which certainly isn't something that's going to get planned here, showing that two projects almost identical, one of which had trees, that it reduced unrest, it reduced crime, it increased social community. So I'm just making a pitch for that as perhaps another piece of the puzzle down the line. And I'll stop talking about it now. Mr. Jackson, I'm just asking if I've said anything inaccurate so far.
No, thank you.
Hey, so far so good. Okay, so one of the things that I said in study session, and I'd just like to repeat here, is that I have canvassed that cottage housing at 15th and Snyder multiple times over the years, and it really does have a very different feel. It really feels like a neighborhood. People know each other, they know their schedules, they know their kids, and having that common open space is supposed to foster community. And you know what? It does. It's a lovely addition to any neighborhood in Bremerton, in my strong opinion. Okay. Quick technical question, Mr. Jackson. It's a 60 square foot porch that's required on each one of the cottage housing units. That's correct?
Correct.
And it counts as part of the 400 square foot common open space required for each unit in the cottage housing. That's still correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it is possible that a developer could just reduce the common open space to 340 square foot for each unit. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say that it's, I would say that in addition to that front porch, that 340 feet are required.
Okay. So I'm just making a quiet hope that perhaps the porch would not be considered common open space, since, you know, it kind of isn't. But I'm also going to say that I don't know what made you guys decide on that porch, but it was brilliant. A porch is a wonderful interface between public space and private space. I'm so impressed by that part of the design process. I'm just making a quiet request that perhaps it could be considered as not common space. Finally, on public transit, I sit on the Kitsap Transit Board with Mayor Wheeler. I'm just parenthetically, Mayor, I'm very sorry you didn't reach out to me. As you know from the last meeting, I would have supported that letter entirely. But is it still accurate, Mr. Jackson, that there is a restriction on housing density and parking spaces that can be removed if Sunday public transport is available, if 7-day-a-week public transport is available? I know that used to be the case, but it might not be any longer. Mr. Jackson, you're muted.
There are Washington state provisions that if you have frequent transit service, which I don't think anywhere in the city or in Kitsap County falls under the definition of the frequency required. But if you have frequent transit service, then there are parking maximums that the state imposes. So we would have reduced parking if we met that level of transit service as mandated by the state. There is a separate traffic reduction section in the zoning code where you can substitute the parking requirements with the recommendation of a traffic engineer, though that is at the discretion of the community development, and we have not in cases permitted less than one parking space per multifamily development, and we have never reduced for single family homes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's a very complete answer, Mr. Jackson. You know, I must say I had not realized that Bremerton used to have its own buses. I find that a fascinating suggestion. I would love us to have circulating buses. We could have double-decker buses on Sundays, you know, red ones going around with bells clanging and children clamoring to jump on. But having regular public transit is for our larger than the area average disabled community would be of use. It would foster more of this dense housing. Well, it would also foster in-city tourism where people could get downtown. It would just generally be good for equity. I want to close in case it sounds as though I've been just one criticism after another. I am so pleased to be part of a council to which you have presented this sensible, compassionate solution to the lack of housing and the lack of affordable housing in our city. This is the culmination of a lot of work, and I applaud you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Montclair. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Vice President Chamberlain. You are doing a great job tonight, by the way. Boy, a lot of moving parts in this for me. I found myself taking notes, and I don't normally do that. And then I actually went through those notes and kind of redid them. That to me signifies how important this is. To me, it's just a signal. Wow, yeah, this is important. I commend the staff. I know I've only been a part of this process, but I've been very impressed, not only with the process, but with the intent behind it. I think that it's more than simply state compliance, that it comes from a place of value. What our priorities are, as a city and so forth. I grew up in courtyard housing. My mom was a single mom. She had me in the 50s. So in Southern California, this was prevalent. So I grew up with this, and it was an incredible little neighborhood. We knew each other well. It certainly promoted connection between people and families. And in those days, maybe a family had a car, maybe a family car in those days, but there was public transportation in Southern California, I think, that allowed that, to happen. Getting into, I think the most exciting thing about this that hasn't really been, I know we all are aware of it, and the fact that we've included Bremerton Housing Authority as a possible partner with this, I think that is evolutionary. And I just commend staff for really moving on that and making that partnership happen. The green space, I've been talking more and more as we talk about density, what we're going to really have to talk about, because I know that community development is already on it, and that is the mitigation fees, if any, with density for open space, and how that money could be designated. And, one use could be parks and rec, reinvesting right into what is kind of taken away with that open space within a development. I am so supportive of this. I don't want it to be just a political point, we did this. I'm going to be looking for impact, because so far we all know it makes sense. Come on, it just makes sense, right? And I, for one, love the romance of going back into that style of community. So I'm a big fan personally. All these boxes that we're ticking, I don't know what the data is going to look like. I don't know what real impact this is going to have, it being opened up like this. But hey, why not? Right? But I am going to be looking for what our numbers are around permits as we move possibly to open this up. And then, I think this is kind of a baby step. This has been a really good starting place for discussions around the intersection between affordable housing and density. And those are conversations that are coming up for us that are probably going to be a little bit more difficult than this. Maybe not. I hope not. But I just am really proud to have been a part of this process. Somebody said they've been really proud of what tonight, the citizen involvement was incredible. Thank you so much. Bravo to Yoda on City Council, former President Eric Younger, who came up with that idea to send postcards out. Let's keep doing that. Yay. And I think that's all I have. But yeah, that took me 2 rounds of notes, and I've still got stuff to process. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fry. We did have good involvement. I counted 15 comments, 14 participants, and I felt like that's why we needed a break, to just kind of step away from all that great public comment. And speaking of which, our biggest fan of public comment is up next here, Councilmember Younger. I defer to you.
Thank you. So as usual, I tend to wait until the end. I really do appreciate the public's testimony on this. And I'm glad we sent the mailers out. Thank you, Mayor, for doing that, and administration for doing that, because a broad net was cast. I'm confident that everybody that was in that zoning, for the most part, was put on notice, and they have the opportunity to participate tonight or contact one of the council members. So I do believe that the public process was initiated correctly with those mailers. So thank you for that. Listening to the testimony and listening to Mr. Jackson's presentation for the second time after the study session with all these questions, and having a week to think between that has really helped me with my thinking. There are some really good things in here. There are some things that I think are going to have negative effects that we're going to find out. And I'm struggling on which way I'm voting on this because of those perceived negative effects. Now, I'm going to just kind of share what's going on in my brain. First of all, when this was first presented, I was confusing with the missing middle class with missing middle housing. And let me explain that. I firmly believe in America, the greatest way to reach the middle class is by owning your home. That historically has been the situation. I know things are changing with millennials, but then when they hit around 30, in general, they start thinking about putting down roots and buying a home. And historically, price appreciation on their homes, it's your greatest individual investment for most people. So I was confusing this with getting to people so they can buy their own house, so they can stop the rent cycle. You see what I'm getting at? That to me is super important, but it's also important to increase housing stock. So I get that. And theoretically, this would increase housing stock, but I'm not so sure in the right spaces. And I'll explain that in a second. Now, let me talk about the path to homeownership, if you will. If our goal, if anyone else thought this is our goal, I don't believe this hits the mark for that. And the reason is, in my opinion, we have effectively changed the zoning for certain parcels that may make it more advantageous for investors to buy those properties up. If you look at Mr. Jackson's slide, if you look at the colored areas where he says these duplexes and townhomes are going to most likely take place, I would venture that 70% of that is in District 7. Mr. Jackson, that's the back of the envelope thing. You can correct me if you're wrong at any time, but about 70% of the available land to develop is in District 7. And for most people, if you don't recall that slide, that's on the very western portion up against our watershed in the city of Bremerton. Okay, that's my district, District 7. My preference, and really backtracking, I think the horse left the barn a couple of years ago. I think it was a couple of years ago when the council allowed for 2 ADUs and a primary dwelling. And Mr. Jackson rightly pointed out that in the inner city area, not District 7, but the central core, downtown, and all those areas, districts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the development is more advantageous for investors and or homeowners to go the ADU route because you can get bigger density. So this proposed ordinance is not going to increase, in my opinion, duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes in that area. Now, if you say, oh, well, Mr. Younger, how do you know that? Well, I asked last week and the administration provided. In 2018, the council allowed for duplexes and townhomes to be placed in any area within 500 feet of a commercial district. Mr. Jackson threw that slide up, and you could see there's quite a few areas that are represented throughout the city that meet that criteria. Well, since 2018, we've had a grand total of 1 duplex being built. 1, okay? That is a fact. I'm not putting a slant on it. It is what it is. So my preference would be if there was a ownership requirement, a deed restriction. Now, if people say, well, then my property is not going to be that as valuable because I may have to move out of town, well, then maybe you're going to have to sell it. I think it helps cement the contract by allowing these different type of housing types in single family neighborhoods, with people in single family neighborhoods knowing, hey, yeah, I got a duplex next to me, but one of them is the owner. And they're going to monitor that renter. And we're going to help build community. Same with the clusters. I think I would prefer to have homeowners in those clusters. Okay. This does not do that. So then next I turn, okay, so that's my deal on middle class housing. And maybe that's not the intent of this ordinance. Next, I turn into what is middle housing. So during the discussion, I quickly Google it, and you can all do that while I'm talking if you like. Just picked up a random site. This one's called the Congress for the New Urbanism. So I don't think this is a right-wing thing, but I didn't do any investigation. The definition, I think we didn't talk too much or enough about what is middle housing. So bear with me, I'm just going to read it line for line. Missing middle housing is a range of multi-unit or clustered housing types compatible in scale with single-family homes that help meet the growing demand for walkable urban living. These types provide diverse housing options along the spectrum of affordability, including duplexes, fourplexes, bungalow courts, to support walkable communities, locally serving retail, and public transportation options. This is why, and this is what's the tipping point, I think, as I talk out loud for me on this ordinance. We had many people from the public that are clamoring for more bus transportation. We have an ordinance before us that is going to take the duplexes and the townhouses, and they're going to put them way out in the outer skirts of District 7. District 7 out there is not a walkable community. There's not retail, and I don't see any retail coming soon. There's some car dealerships out there. There's the Red Apple Diner around Kitsap Lake, but Mr. Jackson, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I thought the goal for the city of Bremerton is to develop in commercial centers like the Charleston district, the Manette district, downtown, and then eventually Eastside Village. But instead, we want to spread the housing throughout the city. And all these people are calling in tonight and asking for better bus service. Well, if I'm Kitsap Transit, I'm going to say, I want to have the numbers to support that bus service. Okay. We've got 2 members on the board. I'm sure they're saying we want more bus service. I don't doubt that. But Kitsap Transit represents all of Kitsap County, and they have to be objective, and they got to look at the numbers. Well, if this takes into hold and is actually successful, we're going to increase our growth out to District 7, and that's going to hurt possibly the desired growth in our inner core. I could be wrong, but I think that's what's going to happen. I think the intent's in the right place, but yeah, unless someone else wants to speak up, I'll reserve until I actually vote. I'll wait for Councilmember Chamberlain to speak up and any other council members, and maybe you can change my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Younger. Mr. Jackson, I saw your hand physically up. Did you want to reply to anything? Or were you just waving? Maybe you were waving at somebody across the room. I don't.
Only that residential cluster development subdivisions are already permitted in the R10 zone, which permit townhomes. So this would already be permitted in the District 7 in these undeveloped areas. It was my only point. And as far as transit is concerned, it is an ongoing question of chicken or the egg. Does density lead to transit, or does transit lead to density? And I think increased ridership from an increased population is likely going to help transit numbers, but I would defer to Kitsap Transit on that.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Ms. Montclair, Councilmember Montclair. You're muted.
Oh, no. So one of the things that I have learned, and the mayor who's been on the board much longer than I can, certainly amplify or correct, but that Bremerton is the single largest user of public transportation in the Kitsap public transit area. It's by far, far and away. So just throwing that in there for what it's worth, information that you guys might not have.
Thank you. Councilmember Coughlin.
Sure, thanks, Vice President. I'll keep it brief. I just wanted to say thanks to Councilmember Younger for really good comments, and I recognize we do have different geographical districts with different needs, and we're here to represent them, and sometimes sometimes we're looking at that lens. The one thing I wanted to kind of respond to was the home ownership, which I thought was a interesting suggestion. Obviously, in the ADU code change the other year, the owner-occupied requirement was removed. So I think it's interesting to look at, but I would be really hesitant to try and shoehorn it into this ordinance. I think it's something that would need to be looked at separately, and how it applies across the city and to all the different units. So interesting, but I wouldn't really want to try and work it in here.
Thank you, Councilmember Coughlin. Just for housekeeping, Councilmember Mockler, did you want to speak again or after Ms. Fry, or was your hand just still up on accident?
After Councilor Fry.
Okay, Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. I think that the partnership with BHA could really be developed in a way that could include homeownership programs with whatever they redevelop or develop. How large a scale that would require, I don't know, but I think there's great potential there for something like a Bay Vista. And I'm not saying where it should be. I'm not saying it should be that big. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying BHA can administer that kind of program really well. And I have a lot of confidence in that. I think Councilmember Younger's points are really valid, and I do like the analogy of the chicken and the egg, you know, or the egg. I like both. Always a both girl. So yeah, I see a lot of growth happening, what I consider on that other side of the highway out there, down towards Tacoma too. Port Orchard, let's face it, is developing. Paulsbo is developing. At some point, you know, major transportation issues are going to come up, and these are good conversations to have, because I think that Kitsap Transit needs to be responsive other than fast ferries. I really do. I love the fast ferry, but you know, there are a lot of people that need to take their cars when they go over there, and Bremerton's been, for whatever reason, treated like a stepchild for far too long. And now our state officials are asking for Kitsap Transit to step up with state money, I guess, to help us with additional fast ferries. Well, you know, I guess, thank you, but they're not holding Washington State ferries accountable for this, I don't think. So anyway, I know that's a perspective here, but it's all connected, my friends. And let's get Kitsap Transit focused on transiting folks over the land as well as by sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fry. Councilmember Montclair.
Thank you. And just to reply briefly to Councilor Fry, I bring this up often, that, you know, we need more buses, we need more drivers, we need more service. And so far, I have not gotten anywhere, but keep plugging. Yes, Councilor Younger made a number of really good points. I'd like to respond to those as best I can at this advanced hour. One was that Mr. Jackson, in his presentation, pointed out that the ADUs, as currently written, will be always more will be in general more attractive than any of these options. And as you may remember, Councilor Younger, I don't think anyone else here will, as a member of the public, I spoke up strongly in favor of owner occupancy for the ADUs. But, you know, the majority disagreed, and I wasn't on council, I was just a member of the public. But I agree that having an owner occupied building is quantitatively different. This is Mr. Jackson, have I said anything inaccurate so far? Cool. Okay. Then just moving right along, Bremerton is a, what, 39%, 40% home ownership across the city, more or less right in there. And that figure's been pretty steady right along. So it appears that even the increased housing, like the Sunfjord developments, which are in your district, Councilor Younger, have not, you know, they have not changed that relationship of 60% renters to whatever, 40% home ownership, more or less. So there's that to consider, that what, you know, that new construction doesn't seem to alter that. The other thing I think to consider is, how can we make home ownership more affordable to the millennials who, as you say, will eventually turn 30 and want to buy a house? Because right now, with current interest rates and current housing prices, that is out of reach for most. Something that was feasible in the past is no longer feasible. Just look at what happened with the developers who commented on the Eastside Village sub area. All of them, to a person, stated that it wouldn't pencil out for them to create affordable rentals and affordable housing that would be sold and fail to yield profits down the line. Seems to me that it would be even more so. I think your concern is valid. I also think that change is the only constant. I do think one part of your concern is something that DCD should consider addressing, or I recommend that DCD consider addressing, which is that there's very little public transit in District 7. It's the reverse of walkable, as you pointed out. Are there plans to increase bikeability, walkability, public transportation, shuttle buses, and of course anything like that? Because I am not aware of any such plans. And I'm going to stop talking with one final comment, which is I think that the cottage and cluster housing will be most desirable in districts closer to the city's core for exactly the reasons that you're mentioning, Councillor Younger. They're going to look at the parking. They're going to look at the need to have cars for every adult in the household. And they're going to think again about purchasing or renting a small place far from far from public transportation lines. I have more to say, but obviously I can no longer articulate. Thank you, Councillor Younger.
Thank you, Councilmember Montclair. Are there any other council members that have a comment on this issue? Councilmember Dennehy, I did see your hand up. Did you want to make any other comments, or would you like to? Either way, it's all you.
So totally pointless. Thanks for recognizing that. I just, as one of two millennials on council, I just wanted to remind council members Montclair and Younger that millennials are now the oldest millennials are now in their early 40s. So just to check there. Yeah, you can see right there. And yeah, I was getting ready to jump in with a point of order. I'd like, especially on public comment issues, to focus on the ordinance at hand. I understand that public transportation is closely tied to this, but in the interest of time, I would just hope that people focus on the housing ordinance rather than public transportation.
Thank you, Councilmember Dennehy. Okay. I guess it's time for me to make a comment. So I want to address some of the public comments that I heard. So it sounds like one of the issues, and it sounds like there's a workaround for it, Mr. Jackson, is that some folks don't know how to develop a certain lot size. One quote that was mentioned, oh, Ms. Hoover is back. Hello, Ms. Hoover. One quote that was mentioned is that a lot of lots are 50 by 100, and so they need some technical assistance. So it sounds like your workaround is to refer them to the Kitsap Builders Association. Is that right, Mr. Jackson?
If there's questions about zoning, those should be directed to us. Like how many units you can fit, that type of thing. If you're looking to actual, like, will it pencil, technical questions for an engineer, anything like that, that would be the Kitsap Building Association. Got it.
Thank you so much. I wanted to, I appreciated a couple of comments. We have Kathy Bradley, and we also had Mike. I just have Mike written down, where they were worried about the parking requirements and where the cars were going to go. And I do agree that creating higher density on these lots will push cars further into the streets. Now, there are areas where we know that we have parking issues, and we don't have a workaround for that yet. As we know, we've had parking issues since time immemorial of the city. But I do think that's something that as we work the comprehensive plan, as we start to get into that we think about those additional parking issues that could come. But I don't personally see a giant boom in these types of developments. what this issue really reminds me of, and I'm not sure who's seen it, but the KUOW article about war boxes. I don't know if anybody saw that or not. But this sort of reminds me of that we're creating, we have a huge need for housing. And so we're in a sense in a war, right? We have tons of homeless. We have an epidemic out there of homelessness, substance use disorder, mental wellness issues, all kinds of things that are going on. And we need war boxes in our communities. And I can definitely respect what Councilmember Younger is talking about the missing middle class. I'm an older millennial, proud, born in 1979, and I've never been in a situation, in a position to be able to own my own home. And I even tried recently, and this market was crazy. And so there weren't a lot of options for me. And I did want to ask quickly, there was a comment from the public about rent stabilization, which I think, and Ms. Fennell, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's actually legislature that kind of like I think it's frowned upon in our state. We don't have rent control in Washington State. Am I wrong?
We don't. It's preempted.
Okay. So we can't do rent stabilization, rent control. There's no options for that. And so then we have several council members that believe that if we have more housing, that we will in fact have lower rents, that more housing that we're not, but I don't personally believe that. I would love if one of you council members who believes that more housing equals lower rents, can you send me a study where that's actually works in a community? Because I've been out there looking for these studies and I haven't found one. I do believe that more housing is better, that it provides more opportunities for folks to get a home. But what I just don't believe that it'll lower rents. Rents are going to keep going up. But that's neither here nor there. We need housing. I want to address really briefly, as briefly as I can, the issues regarding homelessness and tie that into a conversation real quick, not even a conversation, just a statement about the religious exemption, which is state mandated. We can't get around that. But what I really appreciate that the city has done, the administration has done, is to put some boundaries on how the religious organizations can apply for this bonus density. So I appreciate that the city had the forethought to put some restrictions, boundaries in place in order to try to mitigate that. I am hopeful, even though I'm not part of a faith-based community, I am hopeful that religious organizations and BHA will take advantage of these programs in order to increase housing for folks that are in need. That's why I'm a huge supporter of this. And that's all I really have to say about that. I tried to make it brief. I get to be chair today, so I guess that means I get last word. I did want to ask really quickly, Mr. Jackson, a statement you made early on in your presentation. It says, you said, in part, BHA supports these amendments. Was it amendments or the criteria? And I wanted to know what you meant by in part, and if the BHA has any reservations about the code as presented.
No, it was the bonus density was extended specifically to BHA, and that's what we engaged with them on primarily, and that's what their letter was in support on. So that's why I said in part, because it was specific to the bonus density, because they're included in it.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. And so the BHA has a stellar record. They're really great at not only getting the data, but getting the grants and facilitating that. And I think we do need more affordable housing for folks to be able to use vouchers on. And I want to echo the community members' concerns that this is going to be like a luxury. You know, I am concerned about that, but I don't see this zone change being a huge boom in housing. And I do hope that it provides more options for folks of all different economic levels. Okay, so seeing no further discussion, I call for the question. And Ms. Hoover, you are back. So I'm sure Ms. Smith is very happy to turn it back over to you. Not that she's wasn't very capable and happy to take over.
No problem. Thank you for your patience. Do you hear me okay? Perfect. Councilmember Fry,
Yes.
Coughlin,
Yes.
Dennehy,
Yes.
Mockler,
Yes.
Younger,
No.
Chamberlain.
Yes.
Motion carries. 5 yeses, 1 no.
Thank you, Ms. Hoover. Tonight we have, oh, go right ahead.
No, go right ahead. I've got a head cold, so I'd rather someone else talk.
All I was going to say is tonight there are no general business items. Next up, we have a brief council report from council members. Since it's the last council meeting of the month, we'll start with District 7, Councilmember Younger.
Thank you. That's why I left my microphone on, because I knew I'd be up first. First of all, I want to thank everyone that dialed in, if you will, on the internet and gave us your opinion. It really meant a lot to me. I thought it was a very thoughtful discussion. So again, thank you for everyone's perspectives. That really meant a lot to me, and I think to the rest of the council. A lot of time on these issues, we don't get any public comment at all. And I kind of wonder about that. I know we all have busy lives. And if I wasn't on council, I don't know if I'd be watching council meetings and following everything that, I mean, you expect us to do our job and represent you well. And I understand that. But nevertheless, I appreciate calling in. The other thing is, and this actually is probably just so it's still fresh in my mind, it's towards our audit chair, council member Coughlin. The statistic we passed in 2018, I was here, the expanding the area for the duplexes, and the statistic that I found out today, we only had one built in 4 years. It was quite shocking to me. I appreciate the administration with their toolkit. And I think too often the council passes ordinances saying, well, this will solve this, will solve that. It doesn't solve it. And then we move on and find another solution to add to the toolkit. But maybe we should do a little performance audit on stuff like this and bring it to the council's attention before it comes before a vote like this and shocks everyone. It shocked me. I'm sorry it did. So I'd be supportive of that. I'd be even supportive of increasing the auditor's hours full time. If we have enough, not just on the housing spectrum, but every facet the city does, passing an ordinance saying we're going to do this or that. The state legislature has a performance auditor. It's the legislative auditor. And that's what this individual does. He's got a staff of like 30 people. And they look at programs as directed by the legislature. So I would totally endorse. I know our auditor can do that and kind of does that for some things, but I really would like to see that. Let's prove the effectiveness of our ordinances, not to say, oh, well, we are wrong. Hopefully we'll say, yeah, we are right, but just to see how well we're doing and how well they're being implemented. I think that would be great. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. District 6, Autumn.
Thank you, Vice President Chamberlain. I echo Councilor Younger's call for a full-time auditor, as I've done before. And I think that as evaluating how well our ordinances are working is valuable. I just add the caveat that Director Andrea Spencer brought up last week, which was that it can take quite a while for an ordinance to show full effect. So sometimes I agree that if an ordinance goes into place in 2018, by 2022, you should see more than 4 examples of it. But I would also just, it takes quite a while. Like an ordinance passes, people learn about the ordinance, people begin to plan about the ordinance, people apply for a permit, people have their, it's just a long process. Just adding that caveat, but increasing the auditor to a full-time position, I'm already on record as approving that. And for doing performance things like this, I would certainly be interested in looking at. I'd like to mention that, can someone correct me if I'm wrong? There were at least 2, if not 3 people who said they had owned property but had not been able to figure out how to develop it over a number of years. And these were people who were not, major developers. They just happened to own property. I think one of them had an acre. Feel free, anybody jump in, correct me. And that, I think, bodes well for 2, not 3. Okay. 3, not 2.
There were 2 and a third one who had an acre too that had 50 by 100. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I was seeking interruption, so thank you. So I think 3 out of 15 public comments, that's a substantial number of people. And they are people who are connected to Bremerton, who were here commenting, who were involved in Bremerton. I think that bodes well for the success of this ordinance. Okay, so I'm just going to go on to my fairly brief councilor report, which oddly enough was focused on public transit. I've been talking to actually 2 different people over the past week or so, one of whom is a disabled veteran with COPD, and another is walks with difficulty, just gets around fine, but walks with difficulty. And both of them were severely impacted by the reduction in Kitsap transit schedule and really sought more regular public transit. There is a program which I am calling Call a Ride because I cannot remember its proper name, but in, I think, Paulsbo, Silverdale, and Bainbridge, as part of Kitsap Transit, you can pick up the phone and say, I need a ride, and a vehicle will come to your home. That's not in Bremerton yet, and I would hope that, I think that we should urge Kitsap Transit to extend it here, again, because we have such a disproportionately large percentage of disabled people living in Bremerton. How am I doing for time, Vice President Chamberlain?
I'm not keeping time, Councilor
Okay,
Montclair.
well, I'm about to start wrapping up.
Thank you.
It was really a pleasure to see great public outreach. Councilor Younger, thank you for the suggestion. Mayor Wheeler, thank you for carrying it out. It gives me real hope that if we keep on working on outreach, that we can keep involving people in the decisions. So that was pretty great. Well done, you guys. Have an excellent weekend.
Thank you, Councilor Mockler. Next up, District 4, Quinn Dennehy.
Thank you, Vice President Chamberlain. Yeah, I just wanted to reach out and say thank you, Councilor Younger, for asking that those mailers be sent out, and thank the public for showing up. This was, I felt like, a really robust debate. Also, even though I didn't vote with you, Councilor Younger, I just really appreciate the way you present your arguments and present data, and I really appreciate that. I know it's like to sometimes be in the minority on decisions, and I just really respect you, and I want to say that on the record. So thanks a lot. That's all for me.
Thank you. District 3, Jeff Coughlin.
All right, I'll ditto all the above. Maybe I'll defer discussion about a committee to a study session, but I think that's definitely worth talking about. And I just want to respond to one public recognition comment on the remote meetings, that I believe the exact date is October 5th would be our last meeting unless we reauthorized. And I think the exact wording of why that was passed is in there. So I just want to refer folks to that. And then I should have some slides coming up. Perfect. So yeah, the first slide is a bit of the downers. Some folks have mentioned the other ones are more fun. But I did want to recognize this kind of local group that formed, the Bremerton Ferry Coalition, and they met in my district last night, and I went to the meeting. And to summarize, no surprise, as many folks are, they're, I think, a little upset and frustrated by a couple things. One is obviously the still being on the one boat service. the latest update from Washington State Ferries from September 13th is that the Bremerton route is not likely to be restored until spring, along with 2 other routes as well. But it's another 6 months out. So that sucks. That's a technical term. Reliability, Bremerton is the lowest of all the routes. So by that same September 13 update, for the week of August 29th, September 11th, Bremerton was at 53% reliability. The best I can tell, that's defined as the number of on-time sailings that have been completed, that are scheduled. It's not 100% clear to me, but Bainbridge is showing 100% reliability and 95% considered full service. So there's the reliability aspect, and then there's the communication. Just listening to folks last night, I heard a lot of stories about poor communication where there was a delay and they weren't notified, or a cancellation that happened last second, and so just frustration all around. And I think it's, they're seeing it as Bremerton just seems to be put last, and there's, at least from what they're saying, there's not a good understanding of why, and there's obviously the perception that Bainbridge is getting prioritized as a higher income area, and so I don't have a magic bullet. It's this is certainly above our pay grade as a city council to fix the statewide problem. I really did appreciate the mayor's letter as one possible solution of asking the governor to support Kitsap Transit Fastberry to fill some gaps. I'll throw the idea out there, and maybe we can discuss at study session that maybe council as well should consider writing a letter just in support. It's hard to come up with a specific fix, as I said, but just so folks feel heard, to lend our voice to the conversation, to make sure that the governor and state officials, really know this is affecting folks in our community. So I'll throw that idea out there for next time. And the last couple slides that are a lot more fun is wanted to mention it's going to be Senior Day at the Bremerton Community Farmers Market. So I know there can some folks from the Senior Center over in Manette there. Home Helpers Care is teaching a fall prevention class, folks from Canterbury Manor, Meals on Wheels, etc. So a lot of great resources for our seniors at the farmers market. And then the next slide is, thanks for folks bringing this to my attention. Going on the other side of the age spectrum is the Kitsap Black Student Union is going to be hosting an event at the Marvin Williams Center coming up, and that is going to have a lot of other groups that offer youth support and outreach. So make sure to stay tuned to that. And sorry that my watch will not stop beeping. All right, we're just going to toss that over here. Last slide, wrap it up. Oh, that is the last slide. No, there we go. The last slide was really a giant thank you to staff and the mayor for attending, and staff for presenting these public works projects at our joint district meeting with Councilmember Fry and myself the other week. It was great to see about 25 people show up in person, several people on Zoom. It's recorded and out there for folks who couldn't make it and want to watch it. But really, public works staff just went above and beyond, putting together excellent presentations, taking feedback, listening to folks. So I'm really excited for 11th and Perry, which is already in progress, and then it sounds like a lot of excitement out there for the Safe Routes to School project as well. So big thank you again, and I look forward to I think this council brainstorming on these and doing more of them.
Thank you. District 2, Denise Fry.
Well, that was a wonderful segue. No slides tonight, but I certainly want to echo Councilmember Coughlin's appreciation of the public works staff that were involved in the presentations at our district meeting. I think we both feel, and I hope the public works staff feels as well, that it was successful. To have a good turnout like that. We really appreciated the mayor showing up. Always good to see you out there in the community, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, it was great. I would recommend it to anybody, to any other council member. Hey, thanks, Councilmember Coughlin. I think we were a good team putting that on. And I think Public Works staff really appreciated having a joint meeting so that they could cover 2 projects in one evening too. So a good sense of community. Want to echo, you know, a lot of people with auditors, a lot of people out there don't realize that audit is a lot more than financials, you know, that there are audits of systems and impact and all of that. And I'm a really big fan of audits. I always used to tell staff that this is for us. This is having an audit is a service for the organization being audited. It was tough to bring people around to that viewpoint, but that's truly how I look at it. It's important data, you know, to have. As far as I love what Council Member Montclair said about, you know, give things time to breathe and have a little bit of life before we start holding them accountable. That being said, I still have reservations around how much impact this is having anywhere. Real impact. I think it's a great idea. I think it will have an impact. I don't know how great of an impact it's going to have because I'm not finding it out there, but could be totally wrong about that. And I hope so. I think I would be pleasantly surprised if it had a huge impact. And then, yeah, Kitsap Transit, I'm done. So many of us are just done, not with Kitsap Transit, with Washington State Ferries. The whole thing around that, I am appalled that our state officials have to ask Kitsap Transit to help solve the problem with the state agency. I mean, that's appalling to me that that's happening on a state level. And I support our mayor. I support our local leadership, whoever is sitting at the table, and Councilmember Montclair, that includes you. You know, let's get away from the slick and back, you know, into providing transportation services for your community. And I say that as a fast ferry lover. So yeah, I want to see some accountability there. I truly do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fry. So up next is my report, but I'm going to go ahead and defer a 2.5-minute reply to Mayor Wheeler.
Thank you, everybody. And I appreciate comments about the ferries. And I just wanted to let you know that this actually originated for me. This whole thing, all the way to working with Kitsap Transit, you know, identifying their capacity, to just going out individually, supporting those relationships to create a region-wide push. And so the legislators just signed on to my letter, and so you know, we're going to go to the governor all together. And you know, I know I can't. We can't correct all the bitter feelings, and we shouldn't try, because everybody should feel like they can voice their bitterness. And there's been a lot of suffering. You know, all I can do, you know, as your mayor, is just build this coalition and go see if we can do something and bring some good back home to Bremerton. And so that's it. It's going to take a lot of us working together to do that.
Thank you very much, Mayor Wheeler, and appreciate the work you're doing getting ahead of this, and to all the other council members who mentioned the ferries and the transit. And you know, I mean, I think Bremerton does feel like we get the short end of the stick. We have a lot of people, but I guess we have you know, we generate lower income for the state. Is that right? We seem to be a magnet for folks that need resources, which is actually a kind way to be. It's a kind way to be as a city, to be a magnet to assist people that need resources. And so it's a shame that we as a city are being treated in a way that's second class, third class, fourth class, whatever you want to call it. I actually took the ferry today. I had a chance to visit 2 small businesses. I absolutely love how many small businesses are lined up around the ferry. And I got to visit the baking wahinis, and I got some great baked goods. And I visited, I've definitely visited Fresh Cup a few times, which is where I used to work when I was pregnant with my first son. And I just sent my second one off to college today. And so to go back to the Kitsap transit issue, I was going to talk about Kitsap transit when I made my last comments, Councilman Dennehy, but I didn't. So I'll say my comments now about Kitsap transit. So my boyfriend works next to a transit center, and he works at McLeod's, which is right next to that beautiful new transfer center, right? He is constantly missing the bus, and it's not because he gets out there late. It's because they're late. He thinks he misses the bus. He starts walking. He sees it pass by because they're late. And then just today, he missed the bus again because he thought he missed it, but they were late getting to their stop. Sometimes they're early. It's very unreliable. And so he walks home, which during this kind of weather is great for a 41-minute walk uphill, but it's getting darker. It's going to be raining more. And so he has to decide, do I wait another hour at this bus stop for an hour to maybe catch the bus early, or it'll arrive late and then it'll get me there about half an hour later? Or do I just walk 45 minutes, 41 minutes uphill? Very unreliable. I do want to, remind folks that this bus issue is systemic with a lot of other trades. I'm watching all the time about how bus routes are being canceled for school districts. They're offering sign-on bonuses, and bus drivers just aren't applying. And so this is systemic with a lot of different careers, a lot of different jobs. And there was a mass exodus from the workforce. And I'm one of them, actually, and I went into business for myself. And I think that there are lessons to be learned from COVID, that people are valuing their time and their life differently. And maybe if there were ways to offer, better, working conditions and more respect and things like that, and more pay, that people will come back into these industries. I don't know. That's just an idea, right? But that's neither here nor there. I can't solve those issues, but I can say that blueberry pea patch is looking beautiful over in my district. There's sunflowers everywhere. There's cucumbers, and the tomatoes are finally coming in, y'all. It's beautiful over there. And I just enjoyed taking walks over there and enjoy watching gardens flourish right now with our late summer that we're having. And that's all I have. So, except there's one more point, which is I'd like to wish Councilor Montclair a happy early birthday. Her birthday is not, in fact, on July 4th, as we thought previously. It is on the 26th, which is Monday. Happy birthday, Councilor Montclair. For now, the meetings will continue to be held remotely, including the next study session on Wednesday, September 28th at 5 p.m. Council members will now be in an executive session, a 15-minute meeting to discuss pending litigation allowed under RCW 42.30.1101I, and that action is anticipated. So, council members, I believe you have your codes, and I'll see you there. We'll be back in 15 minutes.
Recording stopped.
All right, so they're in session for the next 15 minutes. This is definitely a long meeting tonight. All right, so they're in session for the next 15 minutes. That's me. Little, I don't know, what would have to have been said for them to vote no? Is it already so far gone that youngers don't vote wouldn't be enough to move anyone else off of their position, and to look a little bit more into it? Some of the things that concern me, and I agree with Councilman Quinn and his praise for Councilman Younger. Uh, in his analysis, he moved away from beautification and some of the other things. Uh, we've got a crisis here. I didn't really hear anything. That's where I left off at during the last break of, what are the metrics? What is this going to, how is this going to impact our unhoused? How is this going to impact those who need affordable housing solutions? Not really hearing that. And so that's definitely a concern. I am glad that they are trying to do some things. So you have to acknowledge that. Was that they are still, it seems to me, believing that more housing opportunities will necessarily result in more affordable housing. Yeah, I'm not seeing how their logic in that, Joe. It's bizarre to me. Um, I mean, to me, it's like the Peanuts, Linus and Charlie Brown's like, hey, I'm gonna hold the football this time. I promise I won't move it. We'll have these builders come in. We're gonna give them all kinds of deals, and things aren't gonna change. Uh, you know, I don't know. I don't have the same appreciation of the beauty of the Pacific Northwest. At least when I weigh it against those that are unhoused or can't afford housing or trying to do everything they can to hang on. And I know that's not um, might not necessarily be a totally fair comparison, right? 'Cause I'm sure people will be able to point to issues that may be a little bit more trivial in their minds, but really important for me. But we're standing by the tenets of who we are as a nation. I think we really need to focus on what the issues are. Healthcare, housing, water, food, for all, and that needs to be, uh, our North Star, our compass that leads us. And I don't feel like we're being led in that way yet. Um, so we're going to have to get a little bit more hardlined, I believe, in creating these solutions. What is that going to look like? Again, advocating at the state level, advocating at the federal level. As they said, tonight, this was a great start. Seeing all of you come and provide your open comment. I hope this continues. Do not rest on your laurels, I beg of you. Because if you do, then stuff will just go back to the way that it's been going, right? Based on my comment, one of the council people has asked to give me a call and have a conversation based on my comments. So you have to continue to push. If you want change, you have to be in it for the long haul, right? A little short burst isn't going to be enough. And it's not going to be enough that if you are a one or two issue person, that if you get some type of resolution on your issue, or let's say, hey, they've done this now, I tried to fight for housing, that didn't work, and now you tap out on everything else, it's going to be difficult to continue to make change, right? So we have an opportunity to continue to steer as we are the constituents. And so I encourage you to continue to do so. And I love to see that, some people like Joe chimed in multiple times, right? Open comment. You don't have to, just speak one time, right? You get to talk about the particular issues. Then you have general comments that you can make. Practice what you want to say. 3 minutes is an eternity. So you can get a lot in there and just continue to make your voice heard. And they're looking forward to that. I'm hoping that I don't know what's going to happen October 5th, aside from my daughter's birthday, but outside of that, if they do go back to in-person sessions, I'm hoping that they keep the hybrid option, because I think that's important for folks that it's at 5:30. Some people are still at work. Some people would like to be able to still tap in and give their open comment. And so I think that's helpful. One thing I didn't care for was when we were given our open comment and they put the timer up like that. They first started where you could still see their faces, and then they stopped that. I don't think that is a way to take public comment. I think, you know, even though they can't see us, which I don't believe they can, we should be able to see them and look at the looks on their faces, right? For all we know, they're turning their cameras off as soon as we're speaking, right? So I didn't care for that. I think they should keep their cameras on and be present for that. So just one of the things that I took note of. Anyhow, just to give everyone who's listening an update, we are having our pancake breakfast this Wednesday, and that will be at 11 a.m. at the New Horizon Ministries. That is at 4040 Wheaton Way, Suite 203. And that is going to be a planning session for the big event that is going to take place in October. Joe says, yes, definitely. I definitely want to see how they respond to my personal comments. Absolutely. You know, I think that's really important. It's just kind of off-putting when you can't, you can't see the person who you're having a conversation with. But yeah, so we are going to have our conversation. We're going to do a planning session for our 4-hour kind of luncheon and planning session. And so we hope that you will join us this next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Address is below. It's just right there on Wheaton Way, across the street from that transit center that Councilman or Councilwoman Chamberlain was talking about, right there where the KFC is. Just go to the back of the parking lot and it's on that second floor in the back. We will be feeding everyone. It is a pancake breakfast. So you are encouraged to come and socialize and, have a conversation. If you have resources or things that you would like to share with the community, we encourage you to come on down. It is open to all. We'll look forward to meeting you in person, for sure. And that's how we're going to make the change, is building a relationship with each other. So even when we disagree, we must have relationship. We must build that community. A good note is the community needs assessment is almost done. You have 10 days left or 9 days left. So I encourage you to fill that out. www.kcr.org/CNA. This is going to guide quite a bit of the work that these community agencies do over the next few years. So KCR, United Way, I believe maybe Kitsap Public Health is in on this, the regional library. A lot of folks have their hand in this community needs assessment. They've had more people fill it out this year, I think 6 times over from when it was done 2 or 3 years ago. A lot of people worked on the questions. And after that community needs assessment is complete and they tabulate the data, they're going to put it up in a space that everyone can access it and aggregate or disaggregate the data how they choose to, so that they can guide their programs and do what they need to do. So folks can call 211 if you don't have a computer, and you can talk to them and they will talk through the answers. It takes about 25 minutes to complete. You cannot sign back in, so please do give yourself enough time to complete the survey, so that you can have your full voice captured. And it's important that your voice is heard, because there are folks that maybe don't share in your interest that always seem to have that time, right? They got time today. So please make some time in the next 9 days to complete that community needs assessment. That's very important there. So I'll leave that up there for a second. This Saturday at Blueberry, the place that Councilwoman Chamberlain was talking about with the garden, we are having our last community barbecue of the year. That will be from 11:30 to 2:30, I believe. So free barbecue. We're going to be there cooking barbecue. You can reach out to us so we can give you a flyer. so that you can come and show up and eat some good food and meet your community in that area. So this Saturday, 11:30 to 3:30, please come on down. Oh boy. All right, we've got about 3 minutes and 53 seconds left. Earlier today, the Kitsap Housing and Homeless Coalition met. That was a very good conversation there. Blueberry Park, yes. Blueberry Park. I don't think it's Sheridan. I think it's on. Is it on Sheridan? Maybe it's on Sheridan. It is Blueberry Park, though. Yes. Thank you for that. You know, I'm horrible with my my locations. You know, one of the other things I did want to talk about was the transportation piece, um, and I know that I just thought it was a little interesting that no one was critical of Kitsap Transit. Matter of fact, they were quite glowing in their praise for Kitsap Transit. But many of us are saying, "Hey, Kitsap Transit isn't doing enough." And so you have the mayor and Councilwoman Montclair that are sitting on the board for Kitsap Transit. You have Councilman Younger saying, "Hey, you know, they've got to look at it and do a cost benefit analysis, and if they don't see the numbers, then they're not going to offer it." You know, when you're the only game in town, you do have a fiduciary duty to the citizens here, and that is part of the problem, right? So all of these things are tied together, and so this is my concern. As folks will say, well, you know what, it's a housing situation, so you know, transportation or transit, you know, gets the skate off of it. And it's like, no, it's all part of it. Housing isn't affordable. People have to work multiple jobs, which means they need to get back and forth where they need to go. And the point that I was making before they came back was, you know, even if you are able bodied, right, that is a huge expenditure in time for public transportation. I am a supporter of public transportation, but it needs to be more frequent, right? In the evenings, on the weekends, et cetera, et cetera. You know, one of the reasons why I started a transportation company, you know, or when we first started, we had a single mother, and we weighed all of her things. You know, she was trying to go to college. She had her backpack. She had her
Hi,
the
this is Angela
the
from
baby
the city
buggy.
clerk. I wanted to let you know that they have extended executive session by 15 minutes.
All right. So just a note there. They've extended the session by 15 minutes. So we'll probably see that counter. But she had her baby
Are you there?
buggy.
This is BKAT.
Here.
Thank you for letting us know. You said another 18 minutes?
15 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Angela.
All right. So you see that was reset. So again, you know, her baby buggy, her school books, her purse, all the things that she needs to carry. One, when she leaves for the day, she's got to take it all, right? Because there's no time to go back and forth throughout the day to take care of what she needs to take care of. And you know, this was 40 something pounds that a girl or a young woman who was maybe 110 soaking wet. And I'm saying maybe, you know, trying to carry all this stuff on public transportation, right? And so that becomes very difficult, depending on if you have to pick up your kids at daycare, you know, and you're trying to leave one job, get them to another place, and then get somewhere else. You know, I can appreciate Councilman Younger saying, "Hey, you know, in my district, in District 7, you know, it's very sparse, and so folks are gonna have to have transportation there." And so all of these, I say all that to say that all these things go together. So we can't look at just one thing and say, hey, you know what, everything's going to be good there. We have to take it and look and see what can everyone do? What can every organization do? What can every department do in order to start to mitigate the issues that exist? Because without that, we're not going to be we're not going to have this isn't going to work, right? It's just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And folks have been working on these issues for years, right? There's been other city councils, there have been other mayors, right? Previous years, there are, you know, these issues persist, and we're not making ground, we're losing ground. So what's going to be different? What are we going to do that's different? One of the things that I believe should and need to happen is we have to change how these programs work. I talked about, giving a subsidy to a family, a host family that would take someone who was unhoused in, right? Then you are helping that person who is having trouble, affording their rent, and you're also helping someone who's unhoused. So it's a twofer. Those are, it's going to have to be A, B, C, D, and E, all of the above, right? In order to work on these things. And some of these things are going to take years to fix. So we have to do stopgap measures that are going to start to cut into these issues. If you do something like that, if you allow people to use their vouchers together, right? Where when people are using their vouchers, you're not saying, hey, you know what? Well, if you work X amount of hours, we're going to start cutting your food stamps down. So you're here, but as soon as you start pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, we're going to start pulling back on those benefits. So you're really kind of stuck in place. You're working harder, but you're working harder for the same thing. So there's really not a whole lot of incentive for you to, you see what I'm saying? And you have to weigh those things. There's only so much time in a day. There's only so much energy. People are stressed out. So we have to look at those things. How are we investing the money? And it's a thing of we're going to have to spend that money one way or another. So if we're going to spend it anyway, why not spend it in a way where we can make people as holistically sound as possible so that when they do become more self-sufficient, it's more sustainable. They're more resilient. They're less likely to need help again because you've actually given them the actual support they needed and not these band-aids that kind of just, we're just giving you a little bit. Not really helping you though. And then only a few are able to break that orbit. They're able to break that gravity of poverty or low income, unaffordable housing. You need time, support. All these things have to go together. College needs to be at the table on this. I would love to see us doing our own building instead of having developers come from out of town and giving them all these subsidies. Why can't we start some type of a grassroots Habitat for Humanity where we all come together and we build the housing? All right, we're going to build a 5-family unit, and 5 families are going to move in there. Maybe 5 families, and maybe you have a couple of host individuals that are with that family. Now they're good. And now those 5 families and those individuals are going to help some other folks build the next complex. And we're just going to keep on doing it. And while we're doing it, we have instructors to come help and teach and certify and provide certificates and degrees so that these same folks that are building these homes are gaining a skill which is going to be sustainable for them. You can also create home ownership programs from that situation also. So we get to decide what we do. We can flip it on its head. It's very interesting how, well, you know what, if you get great credit, if you have great credit, you can go into a auto dealership and man, you're paying hardly anything down, or you're getting a screaming deal, 1-2%. You got bad credit? Oh, you're going to pay 15, 16, 17%. Well, think of how backwards that is. So if you're going to tax people because their credit isn't good, right? Then it's a necessity, so they get the vehicle or they're in the home that they can't afford or whatever the case may be, and they're struggling to try to maintain that. They're not really gaining any ground, right? They're just maintaining. Sometimes they'll miss a payment or whatever the case may be, depending on what their scenario is, which either ends up in a repossession or their credit doesn't improve. But those who have great credit come in, hey, I don't have to worry about paying all that extra interest. My payments are perfect, easy for me. And then they're frustrated when, hey, these folks need SNAP benefits. These folks need TANF. These folks need this subsidy or that subsidy. You say, well, they would just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But they're playing the game with lead weights. So you can free them now and support them now. And it's less likely you would need to support them later. Like I said, I think it needs to be all of the above. So what do we want to do? What are we going to do? Eventually, it's going to affect everybody. I had to think about the NIMBY acronym. Someone said, the NIMBY folks. I was like, well, NIMBY? Oh, not in my backyard, right? So when it gets to the point where you're not in my backyard, that means, right, it's starting to affect you. And now you don't want it to affect you. It's affecting you in ways beyond just your taxes. You want to be safe. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. How can we expect things to be different if we're going to do the exact same thing that we know historically doesn't work? But yet we continue to do it over and over and over again. What do you think? People are just going to tire and just be like, okay, I got it. I've learned my lesson. I've been punished enough. Let me do whatever I got to do to make sure I'm out of this situation. Yeah, some do. Some, like I said, are able to break that orbit, break the gravity of poverty. But that's very few. And then we hold those few up and we say, oh, look, see, they did it. And unfortunately, sometimes those that do will say, look, I did it. Why can't you? And that's really unfortunate. Because we're very resilient, right? We don't always remember the pain when we're going through it. So when we do finally escape it, we don't remember how hard it was when we were in it, trying to get out of it. Empathy, grace, patience, support, love. Seems silly. It's not really. What do we want as a city? What do we want as a county? What do we want as a state? What do we want as a country? What do we want as humanity? How dangerous does it get? We can't lock everyone up. We can't continue to displace the unhoused. Move them here, move them there, move them here, move them there. Eventually, they're coming to a theater near you. Right? And then there's going to have to be an expenditure of money to move them from there. There's going to have to be an expenditure of money for law and order. So if you're going to spend the money anyway, why not spend it in love? And make people as whole as possible. When the council people were saying they like the cottage feel and the community spaces and the yards, that's more than a physical layout. I know some people that live in spaces like that. And unless they're sitting on their porch, they're in their house and the curtains are closed. Because it's more than just the physical layout. It could encourage it, but it may not. And it's less likely to encourage it if everywhere else it's you're a problem, you're an issue, you're a burden, you're a problem. We have to address the whole thing. It's not enough for us to call out the issues that exist. What are the solutions? What are we going to do? Analyze the past. What have we done? What are we doing now? What's worked? What doesn't work? What haven't we tried? What gave us some success? What could we continue to build on? And we try something else. That's what this council needs to do. This is what this mayor needs to do. This is what needs to happen in the city on all fronts. You know, what did, was it Denise Frey, Councilwoman Denise Frey, or was it Councilwoman Montclair that was talking about the dial-a-ride? I haven't heard of this dial-a-ride, but I want to look it up, see how it works. Is there funding for that? Because if there's funding for that through Kitsap Transit, right? Well, there's actual small businesses that are actually providing transportation in the city of Bremerton. So that's something that could be implemented pretty quickly. Pretty instantaneous. If the county, if the Kitsap Transit is willing to share the wealth. Solution oriented. Solution oriented. All right, looks like they should be coming back in 35 seconds here. I think that was a pretty good filibuster. I have never been told that I was not loquacious. I said it's getting cold already. 48 degrees. 48 degrees this morning. That's chilly. And we're not even having the rain yet.
And as we're waiting for everybody to come back, I call the meeting back to order.
Recording in progress.
We will now go to council for a motion. And I'm going to defer to Ms. Fennell to read a recommended motion.
The recommended motion is.
She's here.
I am here. Can everyone hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Move to approve settlement agreement with James Ivanelli in the amount of $150,000 and authorize the mayor to execute the same.
Councilor Dennehy?
So moved.
And do I have a second? Okay.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Councilor Mockler. I call for the question. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Do we need to call Lori in again? Ms. Hoover, I'm sorry. We're having trouble hearing you again.
You can't hear me?
Now I got
Can you hear me?
Now we can
Yes.
hear you.
I told you my voice is going out. Councilmember Coughlin,
Yes.
Dennehy,
Yes.
Mockler,
Yes.
Youngster,
Yes.
Fry,
Yes.
Chamberlain.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. This concludes tonight's regular council business. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Sounds like a kazoo.
I know.
All right. That was a long session. That was a long session. Long session there. But we made it through, everyone. Man, 5:30 to 9. Woo, man, that's my third show today. Seems like I've been in this chair all day. Boy. But we made it through. All right. Let's see. One final thought here I wanted to leave you with. Oh. If you don't mind, definitely, if you haven't, subscribe, like, and share this broadcast. And if you go to the channel, you can see all of our videos. We cover City Council, Olympic College board meeting. We will be covering the CK School District board meeting. We cover REACT. And then there are a host of shows. All right. Well, let me go ahead and go. Hold on just 1 second. Hold 1 second. All right. So I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.